Hi guys. Tonight you step into a stone courtyard, just as the last band of orange light slips behind the hills. The air cools faster than you expect, as if someone quietly opened a door to winter. The castle around you so solid, so confident in daylight already feels different. The walls seem taller, the corners deepen. Shadows collect in places you swear were empty only moments ago. You pause, listening, and for the first time you realize how much of your life depends on a simple thing you never think about anymore: light. The sun does not gently fade here. It leaves, and when it does, night does not ask permission. You probably won't survive this, at least. Not comfortably, not by modern standards, because there is no switch to flip, no bulb to hum to life, no soft glow waiting on a bedside table. When the sun goes down in a medieval castle, darkness takes over completely, and it does so with authority. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, and imagine you are standing exactly where you are now, except the year is somewhere around 1300. The castle gates are closing behind you with a low wooden groan. That sound matters, because it tells you something important. Once night arrives, movement stops, not because people want it to, but because the world shrinks when you can no longer see it. As the last daylight drains away, you feel time itself tighten. Medieval life runs on the sun the way your life runs on clocks and notifications. When the sun sets, options disappear. Work ends. Travel ends. Decisions end. What remains is whatever you prepared for before darkness fell. This is a mainstream historical reality. Historians broadly agree on. Most medieval daily schedules were dictated by natural light, not hours on a dial. Sunset was not poetic. It was practical. It was a deadline. Inside the castle, servants move quickly now, finishing tasks with an urgency that feels familiar, like rushing to plug in your phone before it dies. Doors are shut, shutters are pulled closed, fires are checked and reduced. There is a quiet tension in the air. Not panic, but awareness. Night is coming, and night changes the rules. You follow a narrow corridor inward. The stone under your feet is already cold, stealing warmth through your shoes. Without light, this floor will become treacherous, even now. You notice how uneven it is, how the builders cared more about strength than comfort. Castles were not built for ease. They were built to endure sieges, storms, and time itself. Comfort was optional. At night, it vanishes entirely. Someone ahead of you carries a small flame, not a candle yet, but a rushlight, a thin, dried reed dipped in animal fat. It burns weakly, sputtering, its light barely enough to outline the person holding it. This is one of those quirky historical details that feels almost unbelievable. Rushlights were among the most common sources of light for ordinary people, and they produced more smoke than illumination. The smell follows you, a greasy, earthy scent that clings to hair and fabric. As the rushlight flickers, the walls seem to move. Shadows stretch and collapse. Your eyes struggle to adjust, and you realize something unsettling. Darkness here is not empty. It is active. It shapes how you feel, how you move, how you think. Modern darkness still has streetlights, screens, reflections. Medieval darkness is thick. It presses inward. You pass a narrow window slit. Useless now. During the day it allowed just enough light for defense without sacrificing warmth. At night, it offers nothing but a reminder of what you've lost. Outside, the world is black. No city glow. No distant headlights. Just the sound of wind moving through trees and the occasional animal cry, sharp enough to make your shoulders tense. Historians still argue whether medieval people feared darkness itself or simply respected it. Some suggest night was seen as a natural boundary, not an enemy. Others believe generations raised without artificial light developed deeper anxieties around nightfall. Walking these corridors, you understand how both could be true. Darkness is normal here, but it is never harmless. You enter a larger hall, once bright with banners and polished armor. Now it feels cavernous. The ceiling disappears into shadow. A few candles are being lit along the walls, each flame treated with care. Because wax is expensive. This is another widely accepted historical fact. Candles made from beeswax were costly and often reserved for nobility or religious spaces. Ordinary tallow candles smelled unpleasant and smoked heavily, and even those were not used freely. Each candle is placed deliberately, not to light the room, but to mark it. The goal is not brightness. The goal is orientation. To know where you are, to avoid colliding with furniture, to find your way back if needed. You notice how people cluster near the light. Conversations happen close together. Faces half illuminated. Expressions exaggerated by shadow. Laughter sounds louder at night. Silence feels heavier. You catch yourself lowering your voice. Instinctively, as if darkness might be listening. Somewhere deep in the castle, a door slams. The sound echoes longer than it should, bouncing along stone like a warning. At night, every noise matters more. Without sight, hearing becomes alert, almost defensive. A creak could be a draft, or a rat, or a person where no person should be. There's an old fringe belief, whispered more than written, that medieval castles were designed to sound alive at night on purpose, that creaking beams and groaning wood were seen as protective, proof the building itself was awake. Whether that's true or not, you can see how people might believe it. In darkness, reassurance comes from strange places. You pause near the hearth as embers glow low and red. Fire is comfort, but also fear. One spark in the wrong place could destroy everything. Fire is the greatest enemy of castles after dark. More feared than attackers. Entire towns were lost to accidental flames. Everyone here knows this. That knowledge sits quietly in the room, shaping how close people stand, how carefully they move. As night settles fully, you realize something subtle but important. Medieval night is not an extension of day. It is a different world with different rules, different rhythms, and different dangers. The castle does not sleep the way you do. It holds its breath. You feel your own body slow. Movements become smaller, thoughts narrow. Without light, the future feels shorter, measured in hours until dawn rather than plans or ambitions. And as you follow the dim path deeper into the castle, you begin to understand that surviving medieval nights was not just about shelter or warmth. It was about adapting your entire sense of time, safety, and self to a world that went dark every single day. You feel it almost immediately, the way everyone's pace changes now that the sun is gone. Not rushing exactly, but narrowing. Medieval life after dark contracts inward, like a breath being held. During daylight, the castle is busy, porous, alive with motion. At night, it becomes selective. Only certain actions are allowed. Only certain people remain awake. Everything else waits. Sunset dictates all life here. This is not metaphor. It is structure. Without artificial light, time is measured by visibility, not by intention. You cannot simply decide to keep going. Darkness decides for you. During the day, labor stretches outward. Fields, workshops, courtyards, stables. After sunset, work folds back inside stone walls. Servants, who spent the day hauling water or chopping wood, now hurry to finish final tasks before visibility disappears completely. You watch hands move from confident to cautious. Buckles are checked twice. Doors are tested before being shut. Someone counts candles aloud, making sure none go missing. Wax is money. Light is wealth. A mainstream historical reality becomes clear as you stand there. Most medieval people slept far longer than modern ones, especially in winter. because there was little reason or ability to stay awake. Darkness imposed rest, whether the body wanted it or not. Sleep was not self-care. It was logistics. You follow a servant carrying a small lamp, oil sloshing softly inside. This lamp will not roam the castle all night. It has a destination and a purpose. Once it arrives, it will stay put. Light does not wander freely here. People do. Meals have already ended. Kitchens close early. Fires bank down to glowing coals. Cooking in the dark is risky. And no one wastes fuel for late hunger. Leftovers are cold. Bread and cheese and whatever was prepared before sunset. You eat earlier not because you prefer to, but because night allows no alternatives. It feels strange how final everything becomes. If you forgot something, it will wait until morning. If you wanted to speak to someone, you should have done it earlier. Medieval evenings compressed decision-making into urgency. Procrastination simply does not exist. There is no later tonight. Historians still debate whether medieval people experienced night as a burden or a relief. Some argue that darkness offered rest from relentless labor, a sanctioned pause. Others suggest it heightened anxiety, especially during long winters when daylight barely touched the walls. Standing here, you sense both truths coexisting. Night is rest, but it is also confinement. As darkness deepens, social hierarchy sharpens. Nobles retreat to private chambers where more candles burn, where tapestries soften sound and retain warmth. Servants withdraw to shared spaces, settling in clusters where a single flame must serve many eyes. Class is visible even in the dark, measured in inches of light. You notice how conversations shorten, not because people are tired, but because words require energy, and energy is conserved at night. People speak more softly, more deliberately. Stories replace plans. Memory replaces action. Night belongs to reflection, not progress. There is a curious rhythm to it all, almost ritualistic. At roughly the same time each evening, prayers are said, doors are barred, watchmen take their posts. It happens with little instruction, as if the castle itself knows what hour it is by the position of the moon or the chill in the stone. A fringe detail sometimes mentioned in household accounts suggests that some castles rang small internal bells at sunset, not for ceremony, but as a signal to stop work and prepare for night. Whether widespread or not, the idea fits perfectly. Darkness requires coordination. Everyone must agree to slow down together. You feel your own body responding. Your eyes strain less as you stop trying to see everything. Your movements shrink. You choose paths more carefully. There is no wandering aimlessly here. You go where you must. Then you stop. Outside the walls, the world continues. Unseen. Animals move. Weather shifts. Somewhere, far away, another household is also closing itself against the night. But inside the castle, the focus is inward. Survival now depends on stillness. You begin to understand how deeply night shaped medieval psychology. When half of life occurs in darkness, patience becomes a virtue. Waiting becomes normal. Morning is not assumed. It is hoped for. And as the castle settles into its nocturnal rhythm, you realize something quietly unsettling. Modern life pretends night does not exist. Here, night rules everything, and you are only just beginning to feel its weight. The fire draws you in before you realize you are cold. Not the dramatic cold of snow or wind, but a slow, draining chill that seeps upward from stone floors and settles into your joints. Once the sun is gone, warmth becomes something you must actively defend. Inside this castle, fire is no longer just a comfort. It is survival, visibility, and reassurance all at once. You stand near the hearth as someone carefully feeds it a final piece of wood for the night. Not too much. Never too much. Flames are watched with the same attention you might give a wild animal. Useful. Yes. Loyal. Sometimes, but always capable of turning on you. In medieval castles, Open hearths were the primary source of both heat and light after dark. This is not a romantic exaggeration. Stone chimneys, when they existed at all, were crude and inefficient. Smoke often lingered, crawling along ceilings before escaping through vents or shutters. Your eyes sting slightly now, and you understand why medieval interiors always smelled faintly of ash and soot. Firelight changes everything it touches. Faces become uneven. Expressions stretch and compress. The room no longer has corners so much as suggestions of space. Shadows detach from their owners and move independently. You notice how people instinctively sit with their backs to the wall, facing the flame. No one likes surprises at night. Oddly enough, the goal of the fire is not to fill the room with light. It cannot. The goal is to create a center, a fixed point around which life can briefly continue. Without it, the room would dissolve into blackness within minutes. With it, there is just enough vision to exist. You watch someone hold their hands close to the flame, palms out, turning them slowly. Heat is uneven here. One side of your body warms while the other remains cold. This imbalance was normal. Entire medieval nights were spent rotating limbs closer to the hearth. A quiet dance repeated endlessly. There is another truth you quickly learn. Fire demands fuel. Wood must be cut, dried, carried, rationed. Every log burned tonight is a log unavailable tomorrow. Household records from castles and manor houses show strict accounting of firewood usage. Especially in winter, fires were often reduced overnight, allowed to sink into embers rather than blaze. Full warmth was a luxury reserved for special rooms or special people. You glance upward at the beams above the hearth, blackened from decades of smoke. It becomes clear why fire terrified people as much as it sustained them. One stray spark, one careless sleeve, and the castle could be lost. Stone walls survive fire, everything else does not. This fear shapes behavior in subtle ways. Clothing is pulled tighter, sleeves are tucked back, movements near the hearth are slow and deliberate. Children are kept at a distance. You sense a collective awareness that fire is never entirely under control. Some less discussed accounts suggest that certain castles kept small bowls of water or sand near hearths at night, not for cleanliness, but for emergencies. Whether common or occasional, the instinct makes sense. Fire had to be ready to be fought, even as it was relied upon. There is disagreement among modern readers of medieval life about how much people trusted fire after dark. Some argue that familiarity reduced fear, that generations raised around open flames developed calm confidence. Others point out that fire-related disasters were frequent enough to maintain constant anxiety. Standing here, you feel both responses alive. Comfort and unease flicker together, inseparable. As the fire settles into a steady glow, the room quiets. Conversations soften. People lean closer together, not just for warmth, but for shared light. Fire pulls community inward. Without it, there is no gathering, only isolation. You notice how the flame becomes something to watch, almost hypnotic. After a day dictated by labor, the fire offers motion without effort. It moves, breathes, shifts color. Your eyes follow it naturally. This is where medieval evenings slow into stillness. Not boredom, something closer to surrender. A strange detail surfaces in your mind. In some regions, embers from a hearth were considered protective, believed to ward off malevolent forces during the night. People slept knowing a living spark remained awake while they did not. Superstition or not, the emotional logic is clear. Darkness feels less absolute when fire remains. The heat never lasts as long as you want it to. Slowly, the room cools again. Stones reclaim warmth. Breath becomes visible near your lips. Someone rises to adjust the fire, then thinks better of it and sits back down. Fuel must last until morning. You realize something quietly profound. In a world without electricity, night does not end because you are tired. It ends when the fire fades and sleep becomes the only remaining option. Fire sets the boundary between wakefulness and rest. As embers dim to a deep red, the castle feels heavier. Sound dulls. Movement slows further. The fire has done its work for now. It gave light. It gave warmth. It reminded you that survival here depends on fragile, flickering things. And as you turn away from the hearth, knowing it will be smaller by the time you wake, you understand how every medieval night balanced on this thin line of flame, holding back darkness just long enough for people to endure. You notice the candles before anyone mentions them, not because there are many, but because there are so few. Each one feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if its presence must be justified. In this castle, candles are not background objects. They are decisions. A servant approaches the wall and lights a single wick. The flame catches slowly, hesitant at first, then steadies. Instantly, the room changes. Not brighter exactly, but clearer. Edges sharpen. Faces emerge from shadow. And yet, the servant steps back, satisfied, as if more would be excessive. Because it would be. Candles here are not cheap, not casual. They are resources, tracked and guarded. In many medieval households, wax candles were made from beeswax, a substance tied directly to beekeeping and land ownership. This meant candles belonged, quite literally, to those with power. Monasteries, noble households, and churches used beeswax because it burned cleaner and smelled faintly sweet. Everyone else relied on tallow, rendered animal fat, which smoked heavily and carried a scent that clung to everything. You inhale gently and catch it. That faint, greasy undertone in the air. It is not unpleasant in a sharp way, but it is persistent. Once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. Clothing absorbs it. Hair holds it. Walls remember it. This smell is part of night. Because candles are valuable, they are rationed. You do not light one simply because it is dark. You light one because something must be done. Reading, sewing, guarding, praying. When the task ends, the candle ends with it. Wicks are trimmed. Flames are snuffed carefully. Never blown out. Smoke matters too. Records from medieval estates quietly reveal how detailed candle accounting could be. Some households noted exactly how many inches of candle were burned per evening. This is light measured by length, not brightness. When you realize that, it changes how you understand medieval time. Minutes are not counted. Flames are. You watch as someone lifts a candle holder and carries it across the room, shielding the flame with their hand. The gesture is protective, almost parental. A sudden draft could waste precious wax. Windows are shuttered not only for warmth, but to protect light from wind. A lesser-known detail surfaces as you observe this careful handling. In some regions, candles were reused in ways that feel almost unthinkable now. Drippings were collected. Half-burned stubs were saved. Nothing was discarded without purpose. Even the wick had value. There is uncertainty among modern interpreters about how widespread candle use truly was in ordinary medieval homes. Some suggest candles were reserved only for special occasions, with most evenings spent in near darkness. Others argue that even poor households managed small amounts of light through shared or improvised means. Walking these halls, you sense that light was negotiated, not guaranteed. The candle's flame moves differently than the fire. Smaller, more nervous. It reacts instantly to breath and motion. Shadows sharpen instead of softening. The flame flickers upward, stretching thin lines of light across the ceiling. It feels intimate, almost fragile. You notice how people position themselves around candles. No one turns their back to one. To do so would be to step into nothingness. The candle defines the usable world. Beyond its reach, space becomes suggestion again. Conversation near candlelight becomes quieter, more focused. People lean in, faces draw close. Words feel heavier, as if they must justify the wax they cost. Silence, too, becomes acceptable. Silence does not burn anything. There is an odd emotional weight to candlelight. It feels temporary in a way fire does not. You know this flame will end soon. You know it cannot last the night. This knowledge changes how you experience it. You appreciate it. You ration your gaze. In religious spaces, candles take on additional meaning. Their steady burn is seen as symbolic of vigilance, devotion, or the soul itself. But here, in a living space, symbolism gives way to pragmatism. Light is not metaphor. It is function. Still, belief creeps in. Some people believed candles could sense danger, that a sudden gutter or extinguishing signaled unseen forces. Others swore certain candles burned longer on blessed nights. Whether superstition or pattern-seeking, it reveals how deeply people watched their light. As the evening deepens, you see a candle deliberately extinguished, not because the room is no longer needed, but because it is time to stop. Darkness is allowed back in. Controlled. Partial. The room does not vanish completely, but it recedes. You feel a quiet shift inside yourself. Candlelight makes time feel slower. The flame does not rush. It simply consumes. Watching it, you begin to match its pace. Your breathing steadies. Your thoughts soften. And when the last candle in the hall is finally snuffed, the darkness that returns feels heavier than before, not because it is new, but because you tasted light and let it go. You realize then that medieval nights were not simply dark, they were negotiated. Light was borrowed, measured, and returned. Every candle burned was a small victory against night, and every flame extinguished was an acceptance of its rule. As you step away from the candle's former glow, trusting your memory of the room rather than your eyes, you understand why light itself was a marker of power, comfort, and survival. Here, even a single flame could change how the night felt. The light you encounter next is weaker still, and yet somehow more familiar. It smells first, before it shines. A faint trace of animal fat and damp plant fiber reaches you as someone brings a rushlight into the room. Compared to candles, this feels almost improvised. But for many people, this was the most reliable option available. A rushlight is simple, a dried reed soaked in rendered fat, laid in a shallow holder, then lit. It burns low and uneven, producing more smoke than glow. The flame wavers constantly, never settling. You immediately understand its limitations. It does not illuminate a space so much as mark a presence. It tells you where someone is, not what surrounds them. You watch as the rushlight is placed on a table. The person who set it down adjusts it carefully, tilting it just enough to keep it burning. Rushlights require attention. Left alone, they sputter, smoke, or go out entirely. They ask for patience in a way modern light never does. For households without access to wax or sufficient animal fat, rushlights were a practical compromise. Estate inventories and household manuals from the period frequently mention bundles of rushes stored for winter use. They were cheap, seasonal, and temporary. Light here is grown, harvested, and used up like food. The smell lingers. It settles into fabric and hair, combined with smoke from the hearth. It creates a layered atmosphere that modern noses might find overwhelming. To you, standing here now, it feels grounding. Night has a scent, and this is it. The flame throws a dull halo on the wall, barely extending beyond arm's reach. The rest of the room dissolves into shadow. This forces behavior to change. Tasks become smaller. Hands move closer together. Precision matters less than proximity. You notice how people stop trying to see the whole room. Instead, they work within a tight circle of light. Sewing, mending, counting, quiet conversation. Anything requiring distance waits for morning. Night work is close work. There is a small, often overlooked truth hidden in this kind of lighting. Rushlights encourage stillness. If you move too much, the flame reacts. It smokes. It flickers. It reminds you to slow down. Over generations, this kind of light shapes posture, pace, and patience. Some period writings hint that rushlights were sometimes used deliberately to encourage early sleep, especially in shared sleeping spaces. A weak light naturally ends activity. Once the rush burns down, there is little reason to stay awake. Darkness completes the instruction. There is no full agreement among modern readers of medieval domestic life about how people felt about rushlights. Some descriptions imply frustration with their weakness and smoke. Others suggest they were accepted as normal, even comforting. Watching the flame tremble gently, you suspect both reactions coexisted. Annoyance fades when expectation adjusts. The sound of the rushlight burning is almost imperceptible. A soft hiss, a tiny crackle when fat drips into the holder. These sounds blend with the larger nocturnal symphony of the castle. Wind brushing shutters, stone shifting as temperatures drop. Somewhere distant, a cough, then silence again. You find yourself leaning closer. Instinctively, faces near the rushlight appear warmer, softer. Features blur at the edges. This kind of light forgives imperfections. It hides age. It smooths worry. Perhaps this is why intimate conversations often happened at night, near the weakest light. A curious detail surfaces from rural traditions. In some areas, rushlights were believed to burn differently depending on the mood of the household. A steady flame was taken as a sign of harmony. Excessive smoking suggested tension. Whether superstition or coincidence, it reveals how closely people watch their light. The rushlight burns quickly, much faster than a candle. This impermanence shapes behavior. You feel time compress again. There is an unspoken awareness that the light will not last. Whatever needs doing must be done now, or not at all. As the rush shortens, smoke thickens. Someone trims it, pinching off the charred end. The smell sharpens briefly, then settles. This act is practiced, almost automatic. You realize how much skill is involved in managing even the simplest light source. When the rush finally gutters out, the transition is abrupt. There is no lingering glow. One moment there is light. The next, nothing. The darkness that follows feels deeper because of the contrast. No one rushes to replace it. The room accepts the change. Bodies shift. Blankets are adjusted. Conversations fade. Night asserts itself fully now. You feel how rushlights shape memory. Moments experienced under such dim light blur together. Time becomes less defined. Events feel closer, more intimate, harder to separate. Perhaps this is why medieval nights seem indistinct in records. Darkness erases detail. As you sit there, eyes adjusting to almost nothing, you understand how people learn to live with limited sight. Other senses rise to meet the absence. You hear breathing. You sense movement. You feel the air change when someone stands. The rushlight is gone, but its influence remains. It guided the evening to its natural conclusion. It reminded everyone that night is not for expansion, but for narrowing. And as you settle deeper into the quiet, you realize that this faint, smoky light was not a poor substitute for something better. It was exactly what the night required. Just enough to exist. Just enough to endure. The corridor feels longer now, even though you walked it earlier, with only a torch to guide you. Distance stretches in uncertain ways. The flame hisses softly, fed by resin and cloth, and its light spills forward in a restless cone. Unlike candles or rushlights, torches do not invite closeness. They push darkness back aggressively, but only in the direction they face. You carry the torch carefully, arm extended, aware of how alive it feels. The fire responds to every movement. When you step faster, it flares. When you slow, it settles. The walls ahead glow briefly, then vanish behind you. Nothing here stays lit for long. Torches are used sparingly inside castles, and you understand why, almost immediately. They drip. Resin melts and falls in hot drops. Smoke curls upward in thick strands. The smell is sharp and biting, stronger than candle or rushlight. This is light meant for passage, not for comfort. In larger castles, torches were often mounted in iron brackets along main corridors and stairwells. These fixed points of flame created a rough path through darkness, enough to move guards and servants between essential spaces. Smaller rooms remained unlit. Movement was guided, not free. You notice how shadows behave differently now. They leap. They stretch across walls like long fingers. Every uneven stone creates a distortion. For a moment, your mind fills in shapes that are not really there. You blink, and they vanish. Darkness plays tricks when light is too strong and too unstable. It becomes clear why torches were associated with alertness and vigilance. This is not a light that allows relaxation. It demands attention. The person carrying it must stay awake, focused, steady. For night guards, this was part of the job: to walk, to watch, to keep flame alive while everyone else slept. Accounts from medieval fortifications describe torches being lit at dusk and extinguished before dawn, replaced as needed during the night. Their placement was strategic: corners, gates, stair landings, places where movement mattered most. Light followed responsibility. You pass a watchman standing near a doorway, torch fixed in its bracket. His posture is rigid, eyes scanning shadows beyond the flame's reach. He does not pace. He waits. This waiting is work. Staying awake through the night required training, discipline, and routine. Some records suggest that watchmen rotated frequently, switching posts to avoid fatigue. Others imply long solitary hours with little relief. The truth likely varied. Standing here, you feel how heavy the time would become. Without distraction, minutes stretch. The torch burns down slowly, marking time in smoke and ash. There is a belief found in some regional traditions that torches kept malevolent forces at bay. Fire, after all, was seen as purifying. A lit corridor was a protected corridor. Whether this belief came from fear or comfort is hard to say, but it explains why darkness between torches feels particularly thick. You move past a stairwell, peering down into blackness. The torchlight does not reach far. Steps dissolve into shadow after the first few. Descending without light would be reckless. Many accidents happened this way. A misstep, a fall. Night punished carelessness quickly. You turn back toward the hall, and the torchlight follows reluctantly. This light has weight. It resists direction. Carrying it feels like carrying responsibility itself. You cannot forget it for even a moment. There is a less often mentioned detail about torches that becomes obvious as you walk. They heat the air around them, not enough to warm a room, but enough to create small pockets of warmth that vanish as soon as you move on. Heat here is temporary, localized, fleeting. Some castle regulations discourage the use of torches indoors, except when absolutely necessary. The risk of fire was simply too high. Still, practicality often overruled caution. Darkness could be just as dangerous as flame. You notice marks along the walls, dark streaks where torches have burned for years. Smoke leaves memory behind. Even after the flame is gone, its presence remains. The castle records its nights in soot and stain. As you continue, your senses sharpen. You listen for footsteps that are not yours. You smell the air for changes. You watch how shadows move when the flame flickers. This is how medieval people learned to navigate night. Not by conquering it, but by negotiating with it. The torch begins to shorten. The flame dips lower. You know it will need replacing soon. Someone will come with a fresh one, transferring fire carefully, never letting darkness fully return to this corridor. Light here is a relay, passed hand to hand through the night. Eventually, you place the torch back into its bracket and step away. Instantly, the corridor behind you disappears. The sense of relief is surprising. Torchlight is exhausting. Its absence feels like permission to rest. You retreat towards softer light, towards spaces where darkness is allowed to settle without resistance. Torches serve their purpose, but they do not belong everywhere. They are tools of movement, not of living. As you leave the corridor, you understand something important. Medieval nights were layered. Some spaces were lit aggressively, others were surrendered to shadow. Each choice reflected need, risk, and habit. And as the torch crackles behind you, holding the line against night just a little longer, you realize that light here was never about comfort alone. It was about control. Where the flame went, order followed. Where it did not, the night ruled quietly, patiently, waiting. The cold does not announce itself all at once. It arrives gradually, quietly, as if testing how much you will tolerate before you notice. By the time you do, it has already settled deep into the stone. Castles hold the chill of night the way they hold history. Patiently, completely. You feel it first through your feet. The floor pulls warmth downward, draining it without effort. Stone is honest like that. It does not pretend to be comfortable. It simply exists. As the fire dies lower and the night thickens, the castle's true temperature reveals itself. The warmth you felt earlier was borrowed. Now it is being reclaimed. During daylight, thick walls protect against heat and cold alike. At night, those same walls radiate stored chill inward. This is a simple physical reality that medieval builders understood well. Stone equalizes temperature slowly, which means winter cold lingers long after sunset. You are not imagining it. The room really is getting colder by the minute. You shift your weight, instinctively seeking a place where the floor feels less severe. There is none. Rugs help slightly, but they are thin and precious. Straw sometimes lines sleeping areas, not for softness, but for insulation. Even so, cold finds its way through everything. You notice how people move differently now. Shoulders rise, arms fold inward, bodies curve slightly, conserving heat. Clothing becomes more important than posture. Wool layers trap warmth, but only if you stay still. Movement creates drafts, and drafts steal heat fast. Medieval castles were not heated spaces in the modern sense. Fire warmed areas near it, not entire rooms. The idea of evenly heated interiors would have seemed miraculous. People learned to live in temperature gradients. Warm near the hearth, cold near the walls, freezing in unused corners. You walk toward an outer wall and place your hand against the stone. It is shockingly cold, even painful if held too long. This is the temperature of night itself. Stored and shared. No amount of bravado changes it. Some rooms fare better than others. Kitchens retain warmth longer due to constant daytime fires. Private chambers with tapestries and wooden paneling feel marginally less severe. Still, no room escapes entirely. Night equalizes everything. There is a quiet understanding that once cold sets in, it will not leave until morning. You do not fight it. You adapt. Extra layers are added. Cloaks stay on indoors. Hats are worn to bed. The concept of changing into lighter clothing for sleep does not exist here. Written descriptions from the period frequently mention people sleeping in garments meant for outdoor use. This was practical, not careless. Removing layers risked losing body heat that could be hard to regain. Sleep here is about survival first. Rest second. You feel the air change as you breathe. Each inhale cools your chest. Each exhale fogs faintly in front of your face. In winter, breath is visible even indoors. This sight becomes normal, a reminder that warmth is temporary. There is disagreement among modern scholars about how much cold medieval people truly endured. Some argue that acclimation reduced suffering, that people simply felt less cold over time. Others suggest that chronic exposure caused constant discomfort that we would find unbearable. Standing here, you suspect the truth sits somewhere between. The body adapts, but it never forgets. You notice how beds are placed away from outer walls whenever possible. Inner rooms are favored, corners avoided. Proximity to warmth matters even in sleep. Furniture arrangement follows thermal logic, not aesthetics. The cold shapes sound as well. Rooms feel quieter, not because fewer noises exist, but because people make fewer of them. Movement slows. Talking becomes shorter. Energy is conserved. Even laughter softens. An overlooked detail appears in household accounts. Some mention heated stones or bricks placed near beds to provide warmth through the night. These were warmed in the hearth before sleep and wrapped in cloth. Their heat did not last long, but even a brief comfort mattered. You imagine holding one now, feeling warmth fade hour by hour. Eventually, the fire sinks into embers. The room cools more rapidly. Someone pulls a cloak tighter. Someone else shifts closer to another body. These adjustments are small, practiced, unconscious. You realize that cold here is not an emergency. It is a condition. It does not require panic. It requires management. This mindset changes everything. Instead of resisting the night, people here absorb it. As you prepare to sleep, the stone beneath you feels unyielding. Beds are raised, layered with straw and wool, but the cold still creeps upward. You curl slightly, protecting vital warmth. This position becomes natural, repeated night after night. The castle does not soften at night. It reveals itself. Massive, indifferent, enduring. Warmth exists only where effort places it. And as you lie there, listening to the subtle sounds of cooling stone and settling wood, you understand that medieval nights were not only dark, they were cold in a way that shaped bodies, habits, and expectations. Cold taught patience. Cold taught closeness. Cold taught people how to endure without complaint. You pull your cloak closer and let stillness take over, knowing that warmth will return only when the sun does. Until then, the castle holds you in its chill embrace, asking nothing more than that you survive the night as quietly as possible. When it is finally time to sleep, you do not undress. Not really. The idea feels almost reckless. Instead, you prepare the way people here always do, by adding rather than removing. Layers go on. Wool over linen, cloak over tunic. Stockings stay in place. Even belts are sometimes left loosely fastened, more for habit than function. Sleeping fully clothed is not a sign of hardship in this world. It is common sense. You watch others settle in around you. No one changes into something special for night. There are no soft fabrics reserved for sleep. No separate identity for rest. Day and night share the same garments. Because the body must be ready at any moment. Fire can break out. A cry can rise. A command can be shouted. You sleep prepared to stand. Beds are simpler than you might expect. Raised wooden frames topped with straw mattresses and woolen coverings. The straw crackles softly when you shift your weight. It smells faintly of earth and hay. A reminder that comfort here comes from the field as much as the castle. You ease yourself down carefully. The straw compresses unevenly beneath you, forming hollows where others have slept before. Over time, beds mold to bodies. Each one carries memory in its shape. The cold returns quickly once you stop moving. Heat drains from your limbs and settles into the bedding. You pull the blankets higher, then higher still, until only your face remains exposed. Even then, you consider covering that too. Sleeping clothed creates a particular sensation. Fabric presses gently against your skin from every angle. There is no moment of full relaxation. You remain slightly braced, as if resting rather than surrendering. Sleep here is not an escape. It is a pause. Written accounts from the period frequently mention people sleeping in outer garments, sometimes even wearing hats to preserve warmth. This was especially true in winter and in stone buildings. Heat rises, and the head loses it fastest. A covered head means a warmer body. You try to find a position that balances warmth and circulation. Too tight, and limbs numb. Too loose, and cold creeps in. Over years, people learn these balances instinctively. Tonight, you learn by adjustment and patience. There is a quiet rustle as others settle nearby. The sound of fabric against fabric, a soft cough, a sigh. These noises feel closer at night. Without light, distance collapses. You sense people rather than see them. There is no illusion of privacy here. Sleeping fully clothed reinforces that. Bodies remain presentable. Ready. Modesty blends with necessity. Personal space becomes flexible. Some historians suggest that sleeping clothed also carried a psychological comfort. Clothing served as a barrier against vulnerability, especially in a world where danger could arrive suddenly. Others believe it was purely practical. Standing here between sleep and wakefulness, you suspect both ideas intertwine. The weight of your clothes grounds you. You feel held together, contained. This is not the floating sensation of modern sleep, surrounded by softness and silence. This is anchored rest. Your body stays aware of itself. You turn slightly and feel the chill seep through thinner fabric at your side. Immediately, you pull your cloak tighter. The adjustment is automatic. You barely wake. In some households, it was common to keep a cloak specifically for sleeping, not because it was cleaner, but because it was thicker. Sleep garments were not about luxury. They were about insulation. The air feels heavy and cool. Breathing slows. Your chest rises and falls beneath layers of wool. Each breath warms the fabric slightly, creating a small pocket of heat that disappears when you shift. There is disagreement among modern scholars about how restful medieval sleep truly was. Some argue that people adapted fully, achieving deep rest despite discomfort. Others point to frequent waking and segmented sleep patterns. Lying here, you sense how easily sleep could fragment. Cold nudges you awake. Sound interrupts. Awareness never fully fades. And yet, exhaustion has its own power. After a long day shaped by physical labor and limited light, the body accepts rest when it comes. Even clothed, even cold, you drift. Dreams arrive quietly. They feel closer to waking thought than fantasy. The textures of the day bleed into them. Stone, firelight, shadows. You are never fully separate from the world around you. A distant sound pulls you closer to consciousness. A beam creaks. Wind brushes the shutters. Your eyes open briefly, but there is nothing to see. Darkness reassures you that nothing has changed. You close them again. Sleeping clothed also means waking quickly. When morning comes, there will be no transition. You will rise ready. This readiness defines medieval rest. It is functional, efficient, unromantic. You curl slightly, knees drawing in to preserve warmth. This position is common, repeated across generations. Bodies fold inward at night, protecting their core. The posture feels ancient, shared. Your face grows cold where it meets the air. You pull the blanket higher, leaving just enough space to breathe comfortably. The world narrows to breath and warmth. Some nights, people slept sitting up, especially the elderly or ill, believing it helped breathing or digestion. Others slept on benches near the hearth to capture fading warmth. Beds were not the only option. Comfort was flexible. As your thoughts slow, you realize that sleeping clothed changes the boundary between waking and rest. There is no sharp line, just a gradual dimming, like the light earlier in the evening. You are still part of the castle even in sleep, still dressed, still aware, still ready. And as you finally let your eyes remain closed, wrapped in wool and straw and shared air, you understand that medieval nights did not ask you to forget the world. They asked you to endure it quietly. Even in rest, you do not sleep alone, even if you wanted to. The night does not allow it. Bodies gather naturally, pulled together by the simple need to stay warm. Privacy bends easily when survival asks for cooperation. You feel the presence of others beside you before you see them. A shoulder close to yours, a back turned slightly inward. Someone's breathing steady and slow. Beds here are wide, not for comfort, but for sharing. Space is measured by warmth, not personal boundaries. Sharing a bed is normal across classes, though the reasons vary. For servants, it is necessity. For nobles, it is habit shaped by tradition and travel. Even kings rarely slept alone. Companions, attendants, or trusted guards often shared sleeping spaces, especially during journeys or winter months. Heat multiplies when bodies press close. This is not metaphor. It is practical physics. One body produces warmth. Two preserve it. Three create a pocket of heat that can last through the coldest hours before dawn. You feel this immediately. The chill recedes slightly as you shift closer. There is a quiet choreography to shared sleep. People turn carefully, mindful of others. Elbows tuck in. Knees align. Everyone learns how to exist without disturbing the fragile warmth being built. Household records and personal letters from the period mention shared beds casually, without embarrassment or explanation. It was simply how nights worked. A bed was a resource, like firewood or candles. Wasting it made no sense. You notice how little movement occurs once people settle. Restlessness breaks heat. Stillness preserves it. Even breathing seems slower, deeper, synchronized. Bodies adapt to one another unconsciously. There is an intimacy here that feels different from modern closeness. It is not romantic by default. It is practical. You share warmth the way you might share a blanket. Trust forms quietly through necessity. Some people bring children into bed with them, especially the youngest. Smaller bodies lose heat faster. Being placed between adults offers protection. The child's breathing becomes part of the shared rhythm, light and steady. There are disagreements among modern interpreters about how comfortable this arrangement truly was. Some imagine constant discomfort and interruption. Others point to familiarity and adaptation. Lying here now, you sense that comfort comes from expectation. This is normal. Your body adjusts because it must. You become aware of small sounds. A sleeve brushing fabric, a sleeper murmuring softly. The subtle shift of weight as someone turns. These sounds do not disturb you. They reassure you. They mean warmth remains. Shared beds also reduce fear. Darkness feels less threatening when another person is near. Night noises lose their edge when you are not alone with them. A creak becomes just a sound, not a warning. There is a lesser-known detail mentioned in some travel accounts. Strangers often shared beds at inns without concern. Travelers expected it. Refusing could even be seen as odd or unfriendly. The bed was communal by default. This shared sleep blurs boundaries between individuals. You lose track of where your warmth ends and another begins. The night becomes collective rather than personal. Dreams mix with breathing. Time stretches. At some point, someone adjusts the blankets. The movement is slow and careful. Practiced. The covering settles again, trapping heat. No one fully wakes. Cooperation continues even in sleep. You think briefly of modern sleep. Isolated. Climate-controlled. Silent. The contrast is striking. Here, sleep is social. It is layered with awareness and presence. You are never entirely alone with your thoughts. This closeness shapes emotional bonds. Families grow used to shared space. Siblings, parents, and children sleep side by side for years. Distance feels unnatural. Solitude at night can feel unsettling. You feel the warmth deepen as the night progresses. Outside, temperatures drop further. Inside, the shared bed becomes its own small climate. Breath warms the air. Bodies radiate gently. There is also restraint. Everyone knows that too much movement risks waking others. Courtesy becomes instinct. Even turning over is negotiated quietly. Some people prefer sleeping back to back, creating a shared wall of heat. Others curl inward. Knees bent, conserving warmth. Positions vary, but the goal remains the same. Keep heat in. Keep cold out. As you drift deeper, the presence of others fades into background comfort. You no longer register individual shapes. Only warmth and pressure remain. The night holds you together, Shared sleep also shortens the distance between waking and rest. When someone stirs, others follow slightly. The group responds as one. Nighttime is not fragmented. It is communal. You feel safe in a way that surprises you, not because danger is gone, but because it is shared. Whatever comes will come to all, not just you. As sleep settles fully, your body relaxes into the collective warmth. Muscles loosen, breath slows, thoughts soften. You realize then that medieval nights were endured together. Heat, fear, darkness, and rest were not solitary experiences. They were shared resources. And as you drift off, surrounded by quiet breathing and layered warmth, you understand that survival here depended as much on human closeness as on stone walls or fire. In the darkness, bodies became shelter for one another. Even after you have settled into shared warmth, the night does not fully quiet. Something else moves through the castle now. Not people exactly, but life of another kind. You hear it first. A soft shuffle, a muted snort, the faint scrape of hoof against stone. Animals live here too. In daylight, livestock belongs outside, in fields, yards, or pens beyond the walls. At night, especially in winter, the rules change. Survival rearranges priorities. Animals are brought inward, not out of affection, but necessity. You catch the smell before you see anything clearly. Hay, manure, warm animal breath. It blends with smoke and wool, creating an atmosphere that is unmistakably alive. Cleanliness here is relative. Warmth matters more. Chickens roost in sheltered corners. Goats and sheep are led into ground-level spaces or undercroft rooms. Even cows sometimes occupy lower halls or attached structures during the coldest months. Their bodies produce heat continuously. A slow, steady warmth that seeps into stone and air. This is not rare. Estate records and farming manuals from the medieval period routinely mention animals housed indoors overnight during winter. It saved lives. Animal and human alike. You feel the difference immediately. Air near animals is warmer, heavier, breath clouds less. Floors feel marginally less cruel. The presence of livestock turns parts of the castle into living heaters. There is sound, too. The quiet chew of cud, a hoof shifting weight, a low murmur from a half-sleeping animal. These sounds become part of the night rhythm, blending with creaking beams and distant wind. You realize that animals also provide reassurance. Predators stay away. Silence never becomes complete. The castle breathes. Some people sleep close to animals by choice. A shepherd curls near sheep. A stable worker rests beside horses. Not out of sentiment, but practicality. Animals are warmth, familiarity, and livelihood all in one. There is debate among modern historians about how widespread this practice was inside large stone castles. Some argue it was limited to outbuildings and lower halls. Others point to archaeological evidence of animal presence well within defensive walls. Standing here, hearing and smelling them, the distinction feels less important. Boundaries blurred when cold demanded it. Animals also change how the night feels emotionally. Darkness feels less empty, less abstract. Life continues in low, steady ways. A goat shifts. A hen settles deeper into feathers. These movements anchor the night. You notice how people move differently around animals, even in the dark. Steps are slower. Voices softer. Familiarity replaces fear. Animals are known quantities. They do not hide intentions. There is an overlooked detail in medieval nightlife. Animals helped regulate time. A rooster stirring early. A cow shifting restlessly before dawn. Long before clocks. People sensed morning through animal behavior. You lie still and listen. Somewhere nearby, a sheep exhales slowly, rhythmically. The sound is calming, almost meditative. It pulls your attention outward, away from worry. Of course, animals bring challenges too. Smell is constant. Accidents happen. Fleas and lice move easily between species. But these are accepted costs. Warmth outweighs discomfort. You think briefly of modern separation between human living spaces and animals, how absolute it feels. Here, that division would seem strange. Humans and animals share nights, weather, and shelter. Life is layered, not segmented. A lesser-known detail appears in some household notes. Animals were sometimes positioned deliberately beneath sleeping platforms to allow warmth to rise. Heat moves upward. People learn to use this naturally. You feel a faint warmth under the bed now. Subtle, but present. It makes the difference between numbness and endurance. The animals settle as the night deepens. Their movements slow. Sounds become occasional rather than constant. The castle shifts again. Adapting to this shared rest, you become aware of how normal this feels. Not romantic, not shocking, just practical. Night here is about stacking advantages. Fire, clothing, bodies, animals. Each layer matters. As you drift closer to sleep, the presence of animals fades into background comfort. Their warmth remains even when attention leaves them. The castle at night is not empty stone. It is filled with breathing, shifting life, human and animal together, enduring darkness as one. And as you listen to the quiet sounds around you, you understand that medieval survival was never solitary. It was shared across species, bound by the simple need to stay warm until morning came again. The sounds of the castle never stop completely. They only change character as night deepens. Once voices fade and footsteps slow, the building begins to speak in its own way. You lie still and listen, and slowly you realize that silence here is never empty. Wood shifts as temperatures drop. Beams tighten, then relax, releasing low groans that travel through the structure. These sounds are not sudden, but they are persistent. They come from above, below. Beside you, the castle breathes as it cools. Stone answers in its own language. A faint crack, a dull pop, not damage, just adjustment. Massive walls responding to cold, the way your joints respond when you sit too long. These noises are ordinary. Everyone here knows them. At night, they feel louder only because nothing else competes with them. You hear the wind next. It moves differently around stone than it does around wood. It presses, then slips, then presses again, finding seams and openings you did not notice during the day. Shutters rattle softly. Somewhere, a loose board taps a steady rhythm against a wall. These sounds once had meaning. People learned to read them. A sudden change in wind direction, an unfamiliar echo, a noise that did not fit the pattern. Night trained attention in subtle ways. Historical accounts of castle life often mention the constant presence of sound, even during rest. Absolute quiet was rare. To modern ears, this might feel unsettling. To those who lived here, it was reassuring. Noise meant the structure still stood. You become aware of distant movement. Not nearby, but somewhere deeper in the castle. A guard shifts position. Someone coughs. A door closes gently. Careful not to echo. These sounds remind you that you are not alone, even when you cannot see anyone. Animals contribute their own layer. A sheep shifts weight. A chicken rustles feathers. A low snort comes from a darker corner of the hall. These sounds ground the night in something physical and familiar. There is a rhythm to it all, a cycle of creak, pause, breath, wind. Once you recognize it, your body relaxes slightly. Unfamiliar noises fade into the background as you learn what belongs. Children raised in these spaces learned the language of night early. They knew which sounds mattered and which could be ignored. A sudden shout, a crash. Those woke everyone. Everything else was just the castle settling. There is some disagreement among modern interpreters about how much fear people felt at night. Some imagine constant anxiety. Others point out that familiarity breeds calm. Lying here now, you feel how repetition dulls fear. Once you know the sounds, they lose their edge. You catch yourself predicting the next creak before it comes. The mind adjusts quickly. What once startled now soothes. There is an overlooked detail in medieval descriptions of night. People often slept lighter, not because they were afraid, but because the environment required it. Partial awareness was useful. Deep, unconscious sleep was a luxury. You drift toward rest, then hover there, listening. The castle becomes a map drawn in sound. You know where walls are by echo. You sense distance by delay. Hearing replaces sight. At times, a sound imitates another. Wind through a narrow slit can sound like a voice. A loose chain can resemble footsteps. In these moments, imagination stirs. You hold still, waiting for confirmation. Usually, nothing follows. The sound passes. The pattern resumes. The night accepts you again. Stories told during the day sometimes resurface now. Tales of intruders, of spirits, of things that move when light is gone. These stories linger not because they are believed fully, but because they fill uncertainty. Sound gives them shape. Yet the castle itself counters fear. Its constant noises say, nothing has changed. The walls remain. The roof holds. The structure endures. You notice how your breathing begins to match the environment. Slow, steady, in rhythm with wood and stone. This alignment helps sleep come closer. The watchmen continue their rounds somewhere beyond your hearing. Their presence is felt indirectly. The absence of alarm is its own message. You shift slightly, and the straw beneath you responds with a soft crackle. The sound feels loud in the quiet. You pause, listening for reaction. None comes. Others remain asleep. You settle again. There is comfort in knowing that night sounds are shared. Everyone hears them. Everyone learns them. Fear becomes collective rather than personal. As hours pass, some sounds fade. Wind calms. Beams settle. Others continue steadily. Breathing. Occasional movement. The living presence of the castle never fully sleeps. You realize that these sounds shaped medieval dreams. Sleep filled with creaks and murmurs produced different images than silence ever could. Dreams blended with waking awareness. Boundaries softened. Eventually, the night reaches its deepest point. Sounds grow sparse, not gone, but spaced farther apart. The castle holds still, as if conserving energy. You rest there, suspended between sleep and listening, held by the steady voice of stone and wood. Darkness no longer feels empty. It feels inhabited, and as your thoughts finally loosen their grip, you understand that medieval nights were not endured in silence. They were accompanied. The castle spoke softly through the dark, reminding everyone inside that they were sheltered, surrounded, and never truly alone. Sleep never fully claims the castle. It loosens its grip. Yes, but it does not disappear. Somewhere, someone is always awake. You sense it even without seeing it. A quiet awareness that while most bodies rest, vigilance continues. Night guards move through the castle on slow, deliberate paths. Their presence is not dramatic. No shouted commands, no clanking armor, just steady steps and practiced pauses. They know where the floor dips, where the stairs narrow, where shadows play tricks on tired eyes. You imagine one passing now, a small flame held low, careful not to wake those sleeping nearby. The light does not announce him. It simply marks his movement, then fades as he turns a corner. This is not a patrol meant to intimidate. It is meant to endure. Guard duty at night was demanding work. Staying awake without modern stimulation required discipline. To help, watchmen relied on routine, timed routes, familiar stops, repeated motions. These habits anchored them through long hours when the body insisted on sleep. In many castles, watch duty rotated. No one stayed awake all night unless absolutely necessary. Shifts overlapped briefly to pass information. Nothing elaborate. A few quiet words. A nod. Then one guard withdrew to rest while another took his place. The fires kept for night watch were small but steady. Their purpose was not warmth, but presence. A lit fire signaled that someone remained alert. In some cases, these watchfires were maintained in towers or gatehouses, visible from outside. Light meant readiness. You picture a guard warming hands briefly, then scanning the darkness beyond the walls. Outside, the world is hidden. Fields, trees, paths, all swallowed by night. Any movement there would be hard to see, but easier to hear. Guards listened as much as they watched. Sound carried far at night. Footsteps, metal, voices. The absence of noise mattered too. An expected sound missing could be as important as a new one appearing. There is evidence in military records that night watch was taken seriously, even in times of peace. Not because attack was constant, but because fire, theft, and accident were always possible. Night magnified risk. You feel a quiet respect for the people awake now while you rest. Their vigilance allows others to sleep. This division of labor is subtle but essential. The castle survives night because someone stands between darkness and disaster. Some guards use simple techniques to stay awake, chewing herbs, shifting weight frequently, singing softly under breath. Others relied on cold itself. The chill kept them alert, sharp, unwilling to relax too much. There is disagreement among historians about how comfortable night guards felt. Some suggest boredom and fatigue dominated. Others argue that responsibility sharpened awareness, making the hours pass more quickly. Standing in this imagined corridor, you feel how focus could replace time. Guards also served as messengers. If illness worsened, if a fire flared unexpectedly, if an animal panicked, they moved information quietly, efficiently, without waking the entire household unless necessary. You hear a faint sound now, a soft knock, then a whispered exchange, a guard checking a door, testing a latch. Satisfied, he moves on. The castle remains secure. The presence of guards shapes how night feels, even for sleepers. You may not see them, but you know they are there. This knowledge allows rest to deepen. Vigilance is shared, not personal. In some regions, guards marked time by calling out the hour, not loudly, but enough to signal continuity. This practice varied widely. Some castles preferred silence, others valued reassurance. Either way, time passed audibly. You imagine lying awake briefly, hearing a distant call, knowing night continues as expected. Nothing unusual. Sleep returns. Guard routes intersect with light sources. Torches, lamps, embers. Each stop offers a moment of warmth and illumination. Each departure plunges space back into darkness. Light moves through the castle like a pulse. There is an overlooked detail in some castle accounts. Guards often knew the building intimately, more so than its residents. They walked it nightly, memorizing every sound and shadow. Their familiarity was protective. As the night deepens, guard movements slow slightly, not from fatigue, but from quiet. Less activity means less to monitor. Still, they remain alert. Night is unpredictable. You sense the hours stretching. The body wants morning, but the mind settles into acceptance. Darkness becomes routine again. At some point, a guard pauses near your sleeping area. You do not open your eyes, but you feel the subtle change in air, a presence. Then it passes. The moment leaves you oddly reassured. Guards also carry authority. If someone wakes disoriented, if fear rises, if a dispute stirs, the guard restores order calmly. Night does not tolerate chaos. As dawn approaches, guard duties shift. Fires are checked. Gates prepared. Reports quietly passed to those rising early. The castle transitions toward light. You remain mostly asleep through this, aware only in fragments. A sound here, a warmth there. Vigilance continues without demanding your attention. This balance defines medieval night. Most people rest because a few remain watchful. Survival depends on shared responsibility. And as you drift deeper into sleep again, knowing someone else holds the line against night, you understand that castles endured darkness, not by resisting it entirely, but by assigning someone to walk through it, step by steady step, until morning returned. Fire never fully leaves your thoughts at night, even when it has settled into embers, even when the room feels calm, its possibility lingers. Of all the dangers a medieval castle faces after dark, fire is the one that inspires the deepest unease. Not invasion, not illness. Fire. You lie still and listen, and somewhere in the distance you imagine the faint crackle of embers shifting. It is not loud enough to wake anyone, but it is loud enough to remind you that fire is alive. It does not sleep simply because you do. Castles are built of stone. Yes, but everything inside them that makes life possible is flammable. Roof beams, floors, furniture, tapestries, bedding, clothing, straw, hay, oil, wax. Once fire escapes its place, it spreads with terrifying speed. This fear is not abstract. Written accounts from medieval towns and fortified estates frequently describe fires that began at night and consumed entire districts before dawn. Darkness slowed response. Confusion multiplied damage. By the time flames were visible, escape was often the only option. Inside the castle, this knowledge shapes behavior subtly but constantly. Fires are never left unattended. Hearths are reduced carefully before sleep. Embers are banked, not extinguished, but controlled. Someone checks them twice, sometimes 3 times. You notice how people position objects away from the hearth. Cloaks are folded carefully. Straw is kept at a distance. Even sleeping arrangements account for fire risk. Beds are placed far enough to avoid stray sparks. There is an underlying awareness that night magnifies mistakes. A dropped coal, a tipped candle, a sleeve brushed too close to flame. In daylight, these errors might be corrected quickly. At night, they could be fatal. This constant caution creates a quiet tension. People do not relax fully around fire, even when they depend on it. Comfort and fear coexist in every flicker of light. Some medieval households kept specific tools near hearths for emergencies. Buckets, sand, wet cloth. These were not decorations. They were preparations. The idea was simple. If fire escaped, you fought it immediately or not at all. There is uncertainty among modern historians about how effective these measures truly were. Some argue that preparedness reduced damage significantly. Others suggest that once fire took hold, little could stop it. Either way, the fear remained justified. You think of the smell again. Smoke clinging to walls and fabric. It is not just residue, it is memory. Each blackened beam is a reminder of what almost happened, or what once did. Children grow up learning fire rules early. Do not run near it. Do not play with it. Do not leave it alone. These lessons are repeated often, reinforced by stories of loss. Fear becomes education. At night, this education sharpens. Shadows near the hearth seem to move. Flames appear taller. Embers glow brighter. Fire feels more powerful in darkness. Not because it is stronger, but because everything else is weaker. You hear a guard pass, stopping briefly near a fire. You imagine him scanning the area, checking for sparks, listening for unusual sounds. His pause is deliberate. Fire is part of his responsibility. In some regions, night fires were deliberately kept smaller than daytime ones. Even in cold weather, warmth was sacrificed for safety. People accepted discomfort to reduce risk. There is a lesser-known belief found in some communities that certain nights were more dangerous for fire than others. Dry air, strong wind, particular phases of the moon. Whether superstition or observation, these ideas influenced behavior. Extra caution was taken when conditions felt wrong. You become aware of how darkness amplifies imagination. A shifting ember becomes a flame in your mind. A creak becomes collapse. Fear feeds on limited information. Yet despite this anxiety, fire remains central. It cannot be removed. It can only be managed. This balance defines medieval nights. Constant negotiation between necessity and danger. You recall how earlier, light and warmth depended entirely on flame. Without it, the night would be unbearable. With it, the risk never fully disappears. There is no safe alternative. As you drift closer to sleep, your body remains attuned to fire sounds. A sudden crackle would wake you. A change in smell would alert you. Even at rest, awareness persists. Some people slept lightly for this reason alone. They believed it better to wake quickly than to sleep deeply. Fire punished delay. Over time, this vigilance becomes habit. Fear dulls into respect. Respect into routine. The mind learns what to notice and what to ignore. You imagine past nights when alarms did sound. Shouts, bells, panic. People running half-dressed into cold courtyards. The memory of such events lives on, passed through stories and cautionary tales. These memories shape architecture too. Stone floors near hearths, raised fire pits, chimneys improved slowly over generations. Each adjustment reflects lessons learned the hard way. You rest now in a space shaped by those lessons. The fire is quiet. The room is calm. The danger is distant but never gone. As the hours pass, embers cool further. The room grows colder, but safer. This trade feels acceptable. You pull your cloak tighter and accept the chill. Fire remains the greatest fear of the night. Not because it is common, but because, when it comes fast. Darkness offers no mercy. Understanding this, you finally let your thoughts settle. The fire is contained. The guard is watching. The castle endures. And as sleep deepens, you understand that medieval nights were lived under constant awareness of flame, not worshipped, not trusted, simply respected as the most powerful companion and the most dangerous enemy a household could have after dark. By the time true night settles in, the kitchens have already gone quiet. What was once the warmest, the busiest space in the castle now rests in a careful half-sleep. Fires are reduced to embers. Pots are emptied and scrubbed. Knives are cleaned and stored away. The work of feeding everyone ends early. Not from lack of appetite, but from necessity. You remember the heat of the kitchen during the day. Steam rising, wood snapping, voices overlapping. At night, all of that would be dangerous. Cooking requires light, movement, and open flame. After sunset, those things become liabilities. Meals are planned around daylight. Supper comes before dark whenever possible. People eat earlier than feels natural to you, knowing that once night fully arrives, the opportunity is gone. Hunger later is accepted as part of the rhythm, not a failure of planning. You lie there now and feel a faint ache in your stomach, not sharp hunger, just awareness. It reminds you how tightly food and time are linked here. Night closes the kitchen the way a locked door closes a room. Leftover food exists, but it is simple. Bread, cheese, cold meat if there is any. These are eaten without ceremony, often in silence, by dim light if eaten at all. No one heats food at night unless absolutely necessary. Kitchen fires are especially feared after dark. Grease, fat, wood shavings. All it takes is one careless moment. For this reason, many households insisted fires be fully banked or extinguished before sleep. The warmth they provided is surrendered for safety. There is evidence in household rules and monastic schedules that night cooking was discouraged or outright forbidden, except in emergencies. This was not strictness for its own sake. It was survival strategy. You imagine a cook hesitating at the hearth, deciding whether hunger is worth the risk. Most nights, the answer is no. The kitchen now smells faintly of yesterday's work. Cooked grain. Smoke. A trace of herbs. The smell lingers in the walls and beams. It does not vanish just because the fire does. Some castles kept a small guarded flame in the kitchen overnight, but only to preserve embers for morning. This made relighting easier at dawn. Even then, it was watched carefully, never left alone. There is a quiet efficiency in this restraint. People here understand that night changes the cost of every action. What is easy by day becomes expensive by dark. You think of how modern kitchens glow at all hours. Refrigerators hum, lights shine, food waits patiently. Here, food belongs to time. Miss the window, and you wait. This creates a particular relationship with hunger. It is tolerated, expected. It does not demand immediate satisfaction. Bodies adjust. Appetite learns patience. Children grow up understanding this rhythm early. If they do not eat when food is offered, they may go to bed hungry. This lesson teaches attention and discipline without words. Some historical descriptions suggest that people occasionally woke in the night to eat small amounts, especially during hard labor seasons. But these moments were rare and quiet, involving cold food and minimal light. No one lingered. There is uncertainty among scholars about how strict these nighttime food habits truly were across regions. Some areas may have been more flexible, others more cautious. Still, the underlying principle holds. Fire at night was risk. You feel the cold again as the absence of kitchen warmth becomes noticeable. During the day, heat from cooking spreads into surrounding rooms. At night, that warmth is gone. The castle cools more quickly. This loss reinforces early sleep. Without heat or food to anchor wakefulness, the body drifts naturally toward rest. Night gently pushes you toward stillness. You imagine morning now. The sound of embers stirred back to life. The smell of grain heating. The return of warmth and activity. Anticipation of that moment makes waiting easier. The kitchen will wake before most people do. Someone will rise early to relight fires, draw water, prepare the first simple meal. Dawn work begins quietly, without fanfare. Until then, the kitchen rests like everything else. Tools wait. Fires sleep. Food belongs to memory. As you settle deeper into the night, the absence of cooking sounds becomes part of the quiet. No clatter, no voices, only the castle breathing slowly. This silence is not empty. It is purposeful. It protects everyone inside from unnecessary danger. You adjust your position slightly, feeling the cold straw beneath you. Hunger fades into the background. The body learns to accept what the night allows and denies. You understand now that medieval nights were shaped as much by what did not happen as by what did. No cooking, no roaming, no busy work. Darkness imposed restraint. And as you drift closer to sleep, you realize that this restraint was not deprivation. It was adaptation. The kitchen sleeps so the castle can survive until morning. Eventually, the night asks something practical of you. It does not announce it politely. It simply arrives as pressure, as discomfort, as the unavoidable reminder that bodies continue their routines regardless of darkness. You need to relieve yourself. In daylight, this would be simple. In night, it becomes an exercise in caution, memory, and patience. You open your eyes to darkness so complete that for a moment you are unsure whether they are open at all. There is no glow, no outline, no reassuring edge of furniture. The room exists only in your mind now. You rely on what you remember, not what you see. You shift carefully, listening for reaction. A small movement. No one stirs. You ease yourself upright, pulling your cloak close. The cold bites immediately. Still, you move slowly. Sudden motion invites mistakes. There are no private bathrooms waiting behind doors. No porcelain. No pipes. Nighttime sanitation in a medieval castle is handled with objects you already know. Buckets. Chamber pots. Sometimes nothing more than a designated corner. You feel along the floor with your foot, searching for the familiar shape. Memory guides you. You know roughly where it should be. Still, you hesitate. Misjudging in the dark carries consequences that linger far longer than embarrassment. Chamber pots are kept close at night for this reason, often under beds, sometimes beside them. They are used discreetly, quickly, and carefully. Cleanliness here is relative. Containment matters more than comfort. You reach down and find the rim. Cool, solid, relief follows, tempered by awareness. You move slowly, controlling every sound. The pot does not tip. Nothing spills. The night allows you this small success. In households with many people sharing space, etiquette governs these moments. No comments, no reactions. Everyone pretends not to notice. Modesty is preserved through silence rather than separation. There are accounts from the period that mention fines or reprimands for careless nighttime waste disposal. Slipping, spilling, emptying pots in unsafe ways. These were not moral failings. They were hazards. In some castles, garderobes are built into outer walls, small stone rooms with openings that allow waste to fall into pits or directly outside. During the day, these are manageable. At night, they are risky. You imagine navigating narrow steps in darkness, torchless, half asleep. One misstep could mean injury or worse. Many people avoided this unless necessary. The chamber pot becomes the safer option. The smell is present, but it is expected. Straw absorbs some of it. Cold dulls it. People grow accustomed. Night does not demand perfection. It demands containment. There is disagreement among historians about how often garderobes were used at night versus chamber pots. Practices likely varied by region, season, and social status. What remains consistent is caution. Darkness changes priorities. Once finished, you replace the pot carefully. The action is deliberate. Even this small task requires focus. Night punishes carelessness. You lie back down slowly, adjusting your clothing, restoring warmth. The interruption lingers briefly in your thoughts, then fades. This too is part of the rhythm. Bodies do not stop being bodies because the sun is gone. Some households assigned servants to empty chamber pots early in the morning. This task was not glamorous, but it was essential. Hygiene here is collective effort, not individual convenience. There is an overlooked detail in medieval life that becomes clear now. Nighttime routines are designed to minimize movement. Every journey carries risk. Stairs, corridors, doors. Darkness magnifies danger. This is why water is drawn before night. Why tools are put away. Why fires are banked. Why pots are placed close. Preparation reduces the need to move. You settle again into shared warmth, the interruption already receding. Sleep returns not as a dramatic wave, but as a gradual dimming of thought. Outside, the castle remains still. Inside, bodies manage themselves quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. You reflect briefly on how modern life hides these processes. Flush, forget, move on. Here, nothing disappears instantly. Everything is handled, contained, remembered. This awareness shapes respect for routine. Even the simplest act becomes intentional. Night demands mindfulness. As your breathing slows, the embarrassment you might expect never arrives. This is not shameful here. It is normal, shared, unremarkable. Children learn this early. Elders accept it. Everyone adapts. Night does not judge. It only requires care. You turn slightly, nestling back into warmth. The castle breathes around you. Somewhere, another person completes the same quiet task. Unseen, unheard. This shared vulnerability binds people together more than daylight ever could. Darkness strips life down to essentials: body, shelter, routine. And as sleep closes in again, You understand that medieval nights were not just about fear or cold. They were about managing the ordinary under extraordinary conditions. One careful movement at a time, until morning returned, before sleep fully claims you again. Something quiet and habitual passes through the room. Words, barely audible. A murmur shaped more by rhythm than volume. Prayer moves through the darkness like breath. You do not see who begins it. It might be a single voice, low and steady, or several whispered at once. In the dark, origin does not matter. What matters is the act itself. Prayer belongs to night. In medieval life, prayer before sleep is less about devotion in the modern sense and more about protection. Night is uncertain. Daylight brings clarity and witnesses. Darkness brings vulnerability. Words spoken before sleep are meant to place a boundary around the body and the soul. You feel how natural it seems here. Not dramatic, not emotional, just necessary. Like closing a door. Some prayers are formal, learned by heart and repeated every night. Others are personal, shaped by fear, gratitude, or exhaustion. Many are spoken so quietly that only the speaker hears them. God, like darkness, is assumed to be close enough. You notice how prayer replaces light in a subtle way. It gives structure to the moment when activity ends. It marks the transition from wakefulness to rest. When words finish, the night is allowed to deepen. Written prayer manuals from the period include specific evening prayers meant to guard against illness, fire, bad dreams, and sudden death during sleep. These concerns may sound extreme to you, but they reflect lived experience. Night carried real risk. There is a phrase repeated often in such prayers, asking to wake again in the morning. Not metaphorically, literally. Sleep was not always guaranteed to end in waking. You lie still and listen. A familiar prayer finishes. Someone crosses themselves slowly. Fabric shifts. The room settles again. Prayer also serves another function. It calms the mind. In a world without artificial distraction, thoughts can wander freely at night. Fear can grow unchecked. Prayer gives those thoughts somewhere to go. You notice how your breathing slows slightly as the murmurs fade. The cadence of spoken words lingers, shaping your own rhythm. Children learn these prayers early, not because they fully understand them, but because repetition builds comfort. Familiar words spoken in the dark reduce fear. Even when meaning fades, sound remains. There is discussion among historians about how deeply belief shaped medieval nighttime behavior versus habit and culture. Some argue faith dominated daily life. Others suggest routine mattered more than conviction. Lying here now, you sense that belief and habit are intertwined. Whether or not doubt exists, prayer still happens. In shared sleeping spaces, prayer creates a moment of unity. Everyone pauses together. Differences soften. Night levels social hierarchy. Nobles and servants speak the same words before sleep. You become aware of a small ritual near you. Someone touches a wooden bead or small charm before settling. These objects often sit at the edge between faith and folk belief. Not strictly sanctioned, but tolerated. Protection matters more than purity at night. There are accounts of people believing that demons, spirits, or restless souls were more active after dark. Prayer functioned as a barrier against these unseen dangers. Whether believed literally or symbolically, the effect was reassurance. You feel the room relax after prayer ends. Bodies shift. Blankets are adjusted. The castle seems to exhale. Sleep arrives more easily now. Thoughts loosen. Worries soften. Prayer has done its work. In some households, prayers were repeated if someone woke during the night. A bad dream. A strange sound. Words helped restore order. Night disruptions were framed through faith rather than panic. You drift toward sleep again, feeling held not only by warmth and stone, but by routine repeated countless times before you. Generations have whispered these same words in similar darkness. This continuity matters. It reminds you that you are not facing night alone. Others have done this before. Others will do it again. The prayers fade fully now. Silence returns, but it is gentler than before. It carries intention. As your mind settles, you realize that medieval nights were not left unguarded, not only by watchmen and fire, but by words spoken into darkness, words meant to stand watch when eyes closed. And as sleep finally deepens, you carry those words with you, not as doctrine, but as comfort. In a world without light, prayer becomes another way to see. Illness feels different at night, even before you fully understand why. You sense it. Pain sharpens. Worry grows louder. The absence of light turns every sensation inward, where it echoes longer than it should. You lie still and become aware of your own body in a way that daylight rarely forces. A tightness in the chest, a dull ache behind the eyes, a cough that seems harmless by day but unsettling now. At night, there is no distraction. The body speaks, and you cannot look away. In a medieval castle, sickness after sundown carries particular weight. Remedies are fewer. Help is slower. Darkness stretches time, making discomfort feel endless. What might be tolerated during the day becomes something to endure carefully through the hours until morning. You hear someone nearby stir, then cough softly into fabric. The sound repeats. Measured, controlled, no one rushes to intervene. This is not neglect. It is understanding. Night limits response. Panic helps no one. Medical care in this world depends heavily on timing. Healers, physicians, and herbalists work during daylight. Night offers only what has already been prepared. Poultices mixed earlier. Broths saved from supper. Herbs hung to dry. You remember seeing bundles of plants earlier? Rosemary, sage, fennel, their scent faint but present. These are not decoration. They are readiness. When illness stirs at night, familiarity with remedies matters. You imagine someone rising quietly to check on a sick child. A hand placed on a forehead. A whisper. A blanket adjusted. These small actions are the extent of care until dawn. Everything else waits. There is a belief common in medieval thought that night worsened illness, not because the body changed, but because vulnerability increased. Cold, damp, stillness, all were thought to invite imbalance. Medical texts from the period often advise rest and warmth at night above all else. Movement is discouraged. Sleep is encouraged even if it comes lightly. The night is not for cure, but for preservation. You feel how true this seems. Even mild discomfort becomes easier to bear when you stop fighting it. The body settles into patience. There is uncertainty among modern scholars about how much medieval people feared illness at night compared to day. Some suggest constant anxiety due to limited treatment. Others argue acceptance tempered fear. Lying here, you feel both. Concern exists, but so does resignation. You hear another sound, a low groan, quickly silenced. Someone shifts closer to a warmer body. Heat helps. Always heat. Fevers are especially frightening after dark. Heat rises unpredictably. Sweats soak bedding. Shivering follows. Without light, monitoring becomes difficult. Caregivers rely on touch rather than sight. You imagine a mother staying awake beside a feverish child, feeling breath and skin, listening for changes. Her world narrows to this single task. Night demands focus. There are accounts of people believing illness could worsen suddenly at night due to unseen forces, whether spirits or bad air. Darkness gave form to fear. Prayer often accompanied care, blending faith and medicine. You recall earlier whispers before sleep. Those words carried hopes of waking well. Now you understand why. The castle itself seems less forgiving when someone is ill. Cold stone draws warmth away. Draughts slip through unseen cracks. Even healthy bodies struggle here. Sick ones struggle more. Some rooms are chosen deliberately for the ill. Inner chambers. Lower ceilings. Fewer drafts. These choices matter. Even slight differences in warmth can mean survival. You notice how quietly people move around the sick at night. No unnecessary noise. No bright flame. Rest is guarded carefully. Disturbance is avoided. There is a lesser-known practice described in some households. A small lamp kept burning near the ill through the night. Not to light the room, but to reassure and to allow quick response if needed. Light here serves care, not convenience. You feel the tension of waiting. Night stretches when someone is unwell. Every hour feels heavy. Morning becomes a goal, almost a promise. If dawn comes, help comes with it. Despite fear, there is also closeness. Illness draws people together, hands held longer, words spoken softer. Night strips away distraction and leaves only care. You hear breathing near you deepen again. The coughing subsides. Relief passes quietly through the room. Not celebration, just release. Sleep returns in fragments. Waking and resting blend. The body hovers, alert but tired. You reflect on how different this feels from modern illness. There is no button to call, no light to flip, no medicine cabinet glowing reassuringly. Only patience, warmth, and attention. And yet, there is something grounding in this simplicity. Care becomes human again. Touch, presence, time. As the night continues, you feel your own body steady. Discomfort fades into background sensation. Breathing slows. The castle resumes its quiet rhythm. Illness does not disappear, but it pauses. Night holds it gently, without cure but without escalation. And as you drift again towards sleep, you understand that medieval knights taught people to endure sickness with calm acceptance. They waited together, watching the dark pass, trusting that morning would bring light, help, and another chance to heal. Children experience night differently. You sense it immediately. While adults learn to manage darkness through routine and restraint, children feel it more directly. More honestly, fear and comfort sit closer together for them, separated by very little. You hear a small movement nearby, a child shifting in sleep, a soft whimper, barely formed. Someone responds at once, drawing the child closer, murmuring without words. No one scolds, no one sighs. Night belongs to reassurance. Children in a medieval castle are not sheltered from darkness. They grow up inside it. From their earliest years, night teaches lessons that daylight never needs to explain. You cannot see everything. You must listen. You must stay close. Sleep for children often happens where warmth is greatest. Between adults, near animals, close to the hearth when possible. Their smaller bodies lose heat faster, and everyone knows it. Protection here is physical before it is emotional. You notice how naturally adults adjust around children at night. An arm shifts to make space. A blanket is pulled higher. A body turns slightly to block a draft. These actions happen without thought. Care is woven into habit. Children wake more easily in the dark. Sounds feel larger to them. The creak of a beam, the sigh of wind, a distant animal noise, without context. These sounds invite imagination. Fear fills gaps where understanding has not yet grown. Stories help. You remember how tales are told earlier in the evening, not only for entertainment, but to shape how children interpret night. Monsters are named, rules are given, boundaries are drawn, darkness becomes familiar, even if still unsettling. Some parents whisper explanations when a child stirs. That sound is the roof. That noise is the goat. That feeling is just cold. Reassurance is quiet and specific. Vague comfort is less useful here. There is discussion among historians about how medieval children perceived fear compared to modern ones. Some suggest constant exposure hardened them early. Others believe fear remained intense but normalized. Watching these small nighttime rituals, you sense resilience growing through familiarity, not absence of fear. Children also learn quickly that night has rules. No wandering, no shouting, no unnecessary movement. These rules are not harsh. They are protective. Children absorb them instinctively. You feel how night accelerates maturity. Children learn patience early because they must. If they are hungry, they wait. If they are scared, they seek closeness. If they wake, they lie still and listen. There is a lesser-known detail mentioned in some household writings. Children were sometimes tasked with small nighttime responsibilities as they grew older, holding a lamp briefly, fetching water under supervision, learning how darkness works by experience. These moments teach confidence. Darkness becomes something to navigate, not something to flee. Skill replaces fear slowly. Over years, dreams come easily to children here. They sleep lighter, waking often, drifting back just as quickly. Dreams blend with waking sounds. The castle becomes part of their inner world. You imagine a child dreaming of the very noises they hear, beams turning into giants, wind becoming breath, animals speaking softly. These dreams are not dismissed. They are discussed, interpreted, integrated. In some households, charms or small objects are placed near children at night, not always religious. Sometimes a smooth stone, a piece of wood, something familiar to touch if fear rises. Comfort does not need explanation. You notice how children sleep curled inward, protecting warmth instinctively. Their posture mirrors that of adults, but smaller, tighter. Bodies learn survival positions early. When a child cries at night, response is immediate but calm. No one rushes loudly. Panic spreads fear. Instead, someone moves close, whispers, touches. The goal is to restore quiet without breaking the night entirely. This teaches children that fear does not require noise. It requires presence. Over time, children grow accustomed to darkness in a way that surprises you. They stop fearing its absence of sight and begin to trust sound and touch. Night becomes another state of being, not a threat. You reflect on modern childhood. Brightly lit, constantly monitored. The contrast is sharp. Here, children are not shielded from night. They are taught to live within it. As hours pass, the children around you settle deeper. Breathing evens out. Small movements cease. The shared warmth holds steady. Occasionally, a child murmurs in sleep. A half-word, a name. No one wakes them unless distress sharpens. Dreams are allowed to pass. You sense how night shapes memory. These experiences become normal. When these children grow older, they will remember darkness not as absence, but as closeness. Arms around them, breath near their ear. Safety built from bodies and routine. The castle feels gentler when viewed through this lens. Not because it is soft, but because care fills its hardest edges. You lie quietly, listening to the steady breathing of those around you, children included. Their trust in this environment feels profound. As sleep deepens again, you understand that medieval knights trained children early in endurance, patience, and shared comfort. Darkness did not disappear for them. It became something they learned to live with, held by others until morning came. As the hours advance, the absence of light becomes a canvas for voices. In the darkness, sound takes on new weight. Stories, whispered and repeated, fill the air. They drift from bed to bed, carried softly, shaping the night without breaking it. You hear tales of distant battles, of cunning foxes, of mischievous spirits. Even the mundane becomes enthralling when spoken in hushed tones against silence. Stories in the dark are a different kind of light. They map the unseen corners of the castle, marking space where your eyes cannot reach. A story about a brave guard travelling the stairwell reassures you. A tale of a clever cat navigating the rafters entertains and teaches caution. Oddly enough, the smallest anecdotes often leave the deepest impressions. These stories are shared carefully. Adults speak low so they do not disturb sleepers. Children listen, learning not just content, but rhythm, timing, and the art of attention. Storytelling becomes a subtle education, teaching rules of behavior, history, and morality without instruction manuals. Tales serve as guides, quietly shaping understanding of night and danger. You notice how voices adjust to the environment. Whispered syllables hover over straw mattresses, traveling farther than they would in daylight. Silence enhances them. Every syllable matters. Volume is measured against proximity, ensuring that only intended listeners receive the tale. This intimacy makes the night feel smaller, warmer, more contained. Some stories carry factual basis. Historical events retold in hushed tones are transformed into narrative patterns, emphasizing human ingenuity, caution, or moral lessons. Others border on the whimsical, blending memory with imagination. People learn to navigate the line between reality and embellishment. Both forms serve the same purpose, filling darkness with meaning. Scholars studying medieval domestic life suggest that oral storytelling at night provided structure when light could not. Without illumination, routine is governed by sound. Stories mark time, pacing the night, easing anxieties that the absence of vision might otherwise amplify. You notice how even minor interruptions affect these narratives. A creaking beam punctuates a sentence, giving it weight. A cough or shuffle forces a pause, drawing attention to the fragility of the environment. Every sound reinforces the fact that night is not empty, but shared, lived, and negotiated. Animals participate as well. A horse shifts, a sheep murmurs, or a dog sighs. Their noises integrate with human voices, creating a layered symphony. The boundaries between species blur. Life continues in concert. In some regions, these animals even become characters within the stories. As companions, tricksters, or cautionary examples, folklore thrives alongside observation. Children absorb stories differently than adults. They interpret threats and morals literally, but also develop intuition. Listening in darkness sharpens their awareness, helping them identify real dangers from imaginary ones. These nighttime tales double as training for survival. You sense that stories also help manage sleep patterns. The ebb and flow of conversation pauses, soft exclamations. Laughter provides a rhythm that coaxes the mind toward rest. Night is long, and in the absence of visual cues, narrative tempo becomes temporal structure. Adults and children alike follow this pacing, adjusting breathing and movement to fit. There is a subtle emotional effect. Shared stories cultivate empathy, connect listeners across ages and roles, and reinforce a sense of community. Even servants and nobles participate, bridging class boundaries in moments when survival and comfort override hierarchy. Some accounts describe residents repeating favorite tales multiple times in a single night. Familiarity brings calm. The predictability of narrative reduces the strain of darkness, offering reassurance that the world remains stable and comprehensible. You feel the cumulative impact of these whispered stories now. They are more than entertainment. They are training, emotional support, and continuity. In darkness, memory becomes alive, both reinforcing lessons and generating imagination. What cannot be seen is made known through sound. Occasionally, stories spark debate or reflection. A tale about a debated event, like a siege or local legend, invites quiet discussion. Historians of today note that even in a period of limited literacy, storytelling maintained communal memory and facilitated critical engagement, subtly guiding listeners to interpret events rather than passively absorb them. You notice how time seems to slow. The night stretches, but not oppressively. Each narrative moment expands, giving attention and weight to small details. Listeners, young and old, absorb not only content but mood, rhythm, and caution. By the deepest hours, conversation softens further, words become fragments. Morale and reassurance take precedence over completeness. Listeners drift, guided into sleep by the cadence of voices rather than the content itself. Night becomes both teacher and lullaby, Stories, like the flames that accompany them, are fragile. They can be interrupted by cold, by fire dying, by shifting bodies, yet their influence persists. Even as attention wanes, the lessons linger, embedding into memory alongside warmth and touch. You realize that in these moments, light has been replaced, not extinguished, but transformed. Candle, torch, and hearth are supplemented by imagination, by voice. Where vision ends, understanding begins. Darkness becomes a vessel for human presence, memory, and shared experience. And as you drift deeper into sleep, cocooned by warmth, bodies, and voices, you recognize that medieval nights were never silent. They were vibrant with narrative, with shared humanity, and with a quiet rhythm that allowed even the darkest hours to be understood, navigated, and endured. The distinction between nobles and servants becomes more pronounced at night. You notice it subtly, not in overt behavior, but in arrangement, warmth, and light. Social hierarchy shapes how people experience darkness, who enjoys comfort, and who endures it more starkly. Nobles sleep in private chambers, often slightly insulated from the chill of stone walls. Tapestries line these rooms, softening the impact of drafts and muffling the occasional groan of settling timber. Beds are raised, wide, and layered with wool and straw, and sometimes even feathers for those with access. Candles, though few, burn steadily, illuminating corners and creating small islands of safety. Heat from a carefully banked hearth lingers longer here. The night, while still demanding caution, is gentler for them. Servants, by contrast, gather in shared halls or upper floors, where drafts find easy paths between heavy stones. They cluster together, using collective body heat to compensate for the lack of insulation. Blankets are thin, and sleeping garments serve both warmth and modesty. Light is sparse. A single candle may serve several people, and often only for the first hour or two after dusk. Later, darkness reclaims these spaces almost completely. You become aware of how movement is calibrated by status. Servants rise cautiously to check embers or adjust blankets, careful not to disturb anyone. They move slowly, aware that misstep could awaken others or waste precious light. Nobles are less restricted, even in sleep. They have better access to warmth, comfort, and safety, requiring fewer compromises. This distribution has practical implications. Those lower in the hierarchy bear more risk at night. Accidents, illness, and exposure are disproportionately their concern. Yet, proximity also fosters cooperation. Servants share warmth, stories, and vigilance, forming micro-communities that are both practical and socially reinforced. The sensory experience of night differs for each class. Nobles may hear the creak of beams and distant whispers, but they have fewer layers of cold pressing against them. Servants lie amid collective sound, balancing sleep with awareness of every movement, every noise, every shift in the wind that passes through poorly sealed windows. Some historians suggest that hierarchy also shapes perception of danger. Nobles may feel insulated from threats, trusting walls and status to protect them. Servants are trained, consciously or unconsciously, to remain alert. Sleep is lighter, listening is sharper, survival depends on attention. The difference extends to clothing and preparation. Nobles can afford additional layers, heavier fabrics, and more bedding. Servants wear multiple garments, but of simpler materials. Layering is crucial, but not luxurious. Every added layer counts, preserving warmth that might otherwise escape into cold stone. You notice subtle rituals that reinforce this structure. Noble chambers may be checked by attendants, ensuring fires burn safely and water is ready. Servants check each other, confirming that blankets are properly tucked and the smallest sources of heat are shared effectively. Hierarchy defines who gives care, who receives it, and who coordinates resources. Sleep patterns differ as a result. Nobles enjoy longer stretches of uninterrupted rest. Servants experience segmented sleep, waking occasionally to adjust fires, check for leaks, or attend to animals, even in darkness. These patterns are socially structured. There is disagreement among modern interpreters about how strictly these patterns applied. Some argue that hierarchy softened during extreme cold or illness, creating temporary equality out of necessity. Others suggest that social divisions were rigid, with each group constrained by roles that night could not dissolve. Observing these arrangements, you sense that both are true, depending on the moment and circumstance. Nighttime conversation also mirrors social structures. Nobles may speak quietly among themselves, sharing stories or planning, while servants whisper lessons, advice, or reminders about duties. Even storytelling reflects position. Tales of bravery, mischief, or cleverness are often adapted to the listener's place in the hierarchy. You realize how closely social roles interact with survival. Darkness, cold, fire, and the need for vigilance are shaped by position in the castle. Status dictates comfort, risk, and the tools available to navigate the night. And as you lie back, feeling the subtle differences in warmth, to sound, and light around you, you understand that medieval nights are not experienced uniformly. Class structures permeate every layer, shaping rest, awareness, and the very rhythm of sleep itself, creating a world where survival and hierarchy are intertwined in the shadows. The castle does not entirely block the weather. You sense it through subtle changes. A draft that slips under a door, the faint whistle of wind through a shutter, the occasional drip of condensation from high ceilings. Even deep inside, the elements are present, reminding you that stone walls are not impermeable. Nighttime in a castle is never entirely separate from the outside world. You feel the cold shift slightly as a gust moves through a narrow gap. Temperature changes are slow but perceptible. Bodies react instinctively, curling inward, seeking heat from nearby blankets or companions. Every adjustment is deliberate, learned over countless nights. The castle is a controlled environment, but only partially. Nature still asserts itself. Rain or snow on the roof creates sound that carries through beams and floors. The impact of a heavy drop on the stone or wood resonates across corridors. You notice how these natural sounds interact with human presence. A footstep echoes differently when water drips nearby. A shifting blanket produces its own rhythm, almost harmonizing with the environment. Sleep must navigate these layers. Some areas of the castle are more exposed than others. Outer chambers feel drafts that inner rooms never experience. Walls, even thick stone ones, conduct temperature. Windows, shutters, and doors provide imperfect seals. Knowledge of these patterns guides sleeping arrangements. People place themselves where warmth is preserved best and exposure minimized. Medieval accounts describe how households planned for seasonal variations. In winter, inner rooms were prioritized. Straw and additional blankets were layered. Animals were brought closer to human sleeping areas for shared heat. In summer, ventilation was emphasized, with windows opened and beds placed to catch breezes. Even in darkness, weather dictated action and awareness. You hear the faint sound of rain striking a roof. It is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, without light. The mind focuses more on sound. Wind gusts through a narrow slit, and you recognize the tone as familiar rather than alarming. Night trains attention, teaching interpretation of small cues. Every shift in temperature, every whisper of the wind, is meaningful. Cold and moisture also influence fire management. Hearths must be banked carefully. Damp air reduces flame efficiency. Candles burn faster in drafts. Torch smoke behaves unpredictably. Preparing for the night is a matter of physics as much as habit. Observation matters. Adjustments are constant. You feel the subtle contrast of warmth from others nearby. Even in cold corridors, the shared presence of people and animals moderates the effects of drafts. Clothing, blankets, and proximity become layers of defense. The night teaches cooperation as a survival strategy. There is an overlooked detail in many historical analyses. Weather affects psychological perception as much as physical comfort. A gust of wind can heighten anxiety, making shadows seem more menacing. Dripping water can disrupt concentration, provoking unease in those awake or partially aware. Awareness of environmental cues is as important as preparation or gear. You notice how sleep patterns adjust to these conditions. Cold prompts curling, huddling, and layering. Wind encourages vigilance. Moisture leads to shifting or adjusting blankets. The night is interactive. It responds to your presence as much as you respond to it. Children absorb these lessons intuitively. They learn which spaces are safer, how to stay warm, how to interpret sounds. Exposure shapes knowledge. By adolescence, night holds little mystery for them. Experience tempers fear. Animals also respond. Horses shift their weight. Chickens murmur. Sheep snuggle closer. Their movement and noise communicate conditions back to humans. Observing this feedback is part of survival. There is uncertainty among modern scholars about the degree to which medieval households could control environmental factors. Some argue that drafts and moisture were constant challenges, while others suggest design and preparation reduced discomfort significantly. Both perspectives likely have merit. Standing here, you feel that night never completely relinquishes control. Weather shapes behavior even in minor ways. Steps are slower on damp floors. Voices are quieter to avoid echoing in halls. Movements are deliberate to conserve warmth and avoid accidents. Each action reflects the interaction between human and environment. You sense the passage of time through these cues. Temperature drops gradually. Wind changes direction. Snow accumulates on roof tiles. The night unfolds in patterns that are predictable to those who pay attention. By the deepest hours, the castle and the weather exist as one system. Stone, air, bodies, and sound interact to create a complex, living environment. Awareness is constant, even in sleep. Because the consequences of inattention are tangible, you lie back, adjusting layers, sensing the subtle pressure of cold against skin and blankets. Awareness of the external environment blends with internal rhythm. Sleep becomes responsive, adaptive. Your body participates in a dialogue with stone, wind, and companions. The night teaches endurance, observation, cooperation, interpretation of subtle cues. In daylight, these skills are useful but less urgent. At night, they are survival. As your thoughts fade and breath slows, you understand that the castle does not merely contain you. It shapes you. Darkness and weather are co-teachers, emphasizing vigilance, patience, and adaptation. And as sleep finally deepens, you realize that medieval nights were never isolated from the natural world. They were intertwined with stone, wind, and moisture. Survival depended on attentiveness, preparation, and quiet cooperation until the first light of morning arrived. Sleep arrives differently each night, shaped by the subtle interactions of warmth, sound, and personal awareness. You feel yourself drifting deeper now, carried by the rhythm of breathing around you, the occasional sigh of stone settling, and the faint warmth radiating from bodies nearby. Darkness has a way of slowing thought, softening focus, drawing attention inward. You sense the beginning of dreams. They do not start suddenly. Instead, they seep gently, shaped by the environment. The flicker of fire from hours ago leaves faint impressions on your mind. Shadows of shapes and movement. The rhythmic sound of wind through shutters creates patterns that evolve into imagined forms. Animals shift and murmur, guiding narrative fragments in your mind. Sleep and waking blur at the edges. Dreams here are not separate from the night. They respond to it, absorbing elements of the surroundings. Cold manifests in landscapes of ice or stone. Flickering light becomes imagined flames dancing along walls. Echoes of footsteps and creaking beams are reinterpreted as distant voices or footsteps through corridors. Every sensory input is woven into the tapestry of the subconscious. Histories pass through oral tradition, remembered stories, and whispered tales often resurface in dreams. A child may replay a moral lesson in a forest imagined within the room. An adult may reinterpret cautionary anecdotes about fire or night wanderers as part of narrative sequences that make sense only in darkness. Memory and imagination become inseparable. Sleep in a medieval castle is influenced by practical considerations as well. Bedding is layered for warmth, and clothing remains on the body, maintaining temperature but constraining movement. These physical conditions influence dream content subtly, creating sensations of heaviness, warmth, or restriction. The body communicates with the mind even when consciousness retreats. There is evidence from diaries and household accounts suggesting that segmented sleep was common. People often awakened briefly in the middle of the night to tend fires, adjust bedding, or relieve themselves. These awakenings were opportunities for reflection or minor action. The mind remained semi-alert, blending vigilance with rest. Dreams sometimes paused, then resumed once attention returned to sleep. You feel your body adjust naturally to these rhythms. Muscles tense and release slowly. Breathing deepens in cycles. Awareness of temperature and proximity continues unconsciously. Even in the depths of sleep, the night environment remains influential. Shadows, sounds, and subtle air currents interact with your senses in ways you cannot consciously control. Animals influence dreams too. The faint shift of a sheep, the low rumble of a cow, or the soft clatter of chickens creates auditory stimuli that blend seamlessly into dream landscapes. Dreams simulate these movements, incorporating them as narrative or sensory elements. The presence of animals provides comfort, warmth, and continuity, shaping subconscious perception of the night. You sense that dreams serve more than amusement. They reinforce memory, teaching patterns of attention and response. A child dreaming of a narrow staircase or an uneven floor integrates knowledge of navigation in darkness. An adult rehearses caution or cooperation through imaginative scenarios. Nighttime mental activity complements daytime learning and survival strategies. Sleep patterns are also influenced by social proximity. Sharing a bed multiplies warmth and reduces anxiety, but it also increases responsiveness. Movement, sighs, or subtle breathing changes of others can ripple through the sleeper's mind, altering dream content. Dreams reflect collective experience, blending individual perception with environmental input. Historical sources suggest that people were aware of these interactions. Practices like gentle singing, rhythmic murmuring, or quiet storytelling at bedtime were designed to guide sleep and dream patterns. Comfort and education intertwined, shaping rest for multiple hours without conscious effort. You notice that sleep has a fluid quality here. Unlike modern controlled environments, the castle allows gradual immersion. The brain adapts to light, warmth, sound, and temperature simultaneously, rather than sequentially. You move through stages of rest organically, guided by environmental feedback. There is no artificial cue to mark the transition. Darkness itself dictates pace. Dreams also incorporate anticipation of morning. People internalize knowledge of time through light, temperature shifts, and sound patterns, even in sleep. You sense the near arrival of dawn as part of dream structure. The mind calibrates with expectation, creating layered awareness that merges with imagination. As hours pass, your mind learns to balance alertness and surrender. Sleep is neither complete abandonment nor full consciousness. It is a negotiated state, responsive to the castle, the weather, the fire, and the people and animals nearby. Awareness persists even in rest, shaping dream landscapes and influencing the body's response. You feel how the combination of physical layering, warmth from others, and environmental cues facilitates endurance. The night imposes its own rules, and through adaptation, both mind and body navigate them seamlessly. Dreams become a tool of survival, preparing you for the next stage of darkness, whether for vigilance, care, or simple continuation of the cycle. And as sleep deepens, you understand that medieval nights are not empty. They are structured, communal, and deeply interactive. The combination of environment, presence, and imagination ensures that even in complete darkness, life continues within and around you. Dreams, like the subtle rhythm of the castle itself, teach endurance, attention, and the quiet art of living until dawn. Superstition grows naturally in darkness. You feel it creeping along the edges of perception. Subtle but persistent. In a world without electric light, shadows take on new qualities. Shapes stretch, bend, and move in ways your mind interprets, often incorrectly. Objects become something else entirely, and imagination fills the gaps. Night is fertile ground for belief. People in medieval castles understood that unseen forces could be threatening. Spirits, omens, and curses were accepted possibilities. The dark amplifies both fear and awareness. Children and adults alike internalize these ideas, blending caution with ritual, prayer, protective charms, and careful observation were used to guard against dangers invisible to the eye. You notice that superstition is integrated into routine. Candle placement may be deliberate, intended to repel malevolent presences. Spices and herbs, hung in corners or burned lightly, are said to purify the air. Objects believed to carry protective power are kept near beds, hearths, or doorways. These are not mere decoration. They are practical attempts to influence an environment that is otherwise uncontrollable. Less commonly discussed are behaviors designed specifically to avoid attracting spirits. People avoid speaking unnecessarily after a certain hour. Footsteps are measured and careful. Shuffling blankets or opening doors is done deliberately, often accompanied by quiet incantations or gestures. This constant awareness shapes both action and psychology. Night becomes a negotiation between the seen and unseen. Stories told before sleep reinforce superstitions. Tales of wandering ghosts, clever spirits, or vengeful animals circulate repeatedly. The content teaches moral lessons, safety practices, and rules of behavior. Even if the tales are exaggerated or imagined, they influence real behavior, shaping how people move, sleep, and interact. Darkness itself becomes a teacher, guiding thought through narrative and ritual. Children respond particularly strongly. Their imaginations fill in every gap. Shadows may be mistaken for figures. Noises interpreted as messages. Parents often use stories to train children to recognize real threats from imagined ones. Blending caution with curiosity. This education begins at an early age, making the night manageable rather than paralyzing. Superstitions also extend to objects and architecture. Certain doors, windows, or thresholds are believed to be portals for malevolent entities if left unguarded. Specific rituals may accompany passage through these areas. Even the direction of bed faces or the location of a sleeping space may carry symbolic meaning. These practices, while seemingly arbitrary, form an integrated strategy for navigating risk. There is debate among modern historians about how much superstition influenced practical behavior. Some argue that fear of spirits dictated strict routines, shaping daily life beyond necessity. Others suggest that rituals primarily reinforced social cohesion and awareness, with belief secondary. Observing the quiet, deliberate actions of people at night. You sense that both are true. Superstition enhances alertness while also providing psychological comfort. Animals, too, are integrated into these beliefs. Dogs are kept near sleepers to alert them to danger, real or imagined. Cats are seen as guardians against malevolent spirits. Livestock placement within the castle may reflect both practicality and superstition. Presence and positioning carry meaning beyond utility. The combination of superstition, observation, and preparation creates a layered understanding of night. You move through darkness consciously, guided by rules, rituals, and shared knowledge. Every sound, every flicker of light, and every shift in temperature carries potential significance. You notice the subtle influence of superstition on sleep itself. Dreams may incorporate beliefs, reinforcing caution and attentiveness. Nightmares or uneasy rest are interpreted through the lens of learned patterns. Even as unconsciousness deepens, the mind continues to process environmental cues, blending imagination with expectation. The practice of reciting protective prayers before sleep is intertwined with superstition. Words are repeated, gestures performed, and objects positioned carefully. The repetition provides reassurance. Even if nothing supernatural occurs, the act maintains order, calms anxiety, and strengthens communal cohesion. As the night progresses, you feel the gradual blending of fear, anticipation, and comfort. Darkness magnifies both vulnerability and the efficacy of learned behaviors. Superstition guides action, shapes sleep, and structures perception. It is inseparable from the lived experience of medieval nights. Even subtle environmental cues, creaking beams, shifting shadows, distant animal sounds are interpreted within this framework. Attention to these cues is both practical and ritualized. A sound may prompt a simple adjustment of blankets or a whispered word. Small actions maintain a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable environment. You observe how these practices ripple through generations. Children grow accustomed to layered strategies for coping with darkness. Adults model behavior, enforce rituals, and provide guidance. Together, these practices create a culture of night that blends rational caution with belief, imagination, and habit. And as you drift towards sleep again, cocooned by warmth, presence, and familiarity, you understand that medieval nights are never merely dark. They are active, interpreted, and mediated by superstition. By attentiveness, and by human adaptation, darkness becomes a shared space of care, caution, and continuity, teaching its inhabitants the quiet art of living between seen and unseen. The first hints of dawn are not dramatic. They arrive slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a gentle exhale across the castle. The darkness that has dominated every corner begins to soften. Shadows that once seemed permanent start to shrink, receding as the faintest trace of light seeps through narrow windows and open shutters. The night, which has shaped so much of your behavior and awareness, begins to loosen its grip. You feel it first as a change in temperature. The chill that crept through stone walls during the longest hours starts to ease slightly. The layers of clothing and blankets that preserved warmth through the night become less essential. Even in sleep, the body senses the shift. Muscles relax. Breathing patterns adjust. The transition is subtle but profound. Outside, birds may stir. A soft rustle of wings or distant call adds layers to the awakening world. The sounds of animals, which have been present all night, change tone. Hooves shift with renewed activity. Chickens and goats begin their morning routines. You notice these adjustments even without opening your eyes. The castle, intertwined with living creatures, responds to the approach of day. Inside, human activity begins to mirror this change. Servants stir gently, moving toward tasks that daylight will allow to expand. Some lift bedding. Others check that fires are banked correctly, ensuring they are ready to resume at first light. Even small movements produce whispers and faint sounds that ripple through the sleeping hall. These are not disruptive. They are part of the gradual choreography of waking. In private chambers, nobles shift under layers of fabric and blankets. Their movements are measured, restrained. Morning will bring activity. But until then, the transition is deliberate. Every action is informed by habit. Each person knows when to prepare, when to remain still, and when to listen for signals from those moving through the castle. Household animals respond to subtle changes as well. Horses stir, stretching legs and necks. Cats yawn and begin hunting for warmth. Even the livestock in lower halls appears to sense the change, shifting slightly, adjusting posture, and preparing for the routine demands of the day. Their presence is a reminder that life does not pause overnight. It merely adapts to the constraints of darkness. Historical accounts suggest that dawn was considered a form of daily salvation. Its arrival validated patience, endurance, and vigilance. Night had imposed limits, but morning restores options. Tasks can be undertaken without the same immediate risk. Light allows vision. Warmth can be reclaimed, and activities delayed by darkness can finally proceed. You sense this anticipation even in your half-awake state. Some scholars argue that this perception of dawn as relief shaped medieval psychology. People measured the night not solely in hours, but by the assurance that sunrise would arrive, the transition itself gradual, unhurried. Predictable offers both comfort and structure, awareness of time. In these moments, is less abstract than a clock could provide. It is tactile, sensory, and communal. You notice the interplay of light and memory as day begins to return. The flicker of embers, the dim glow of remaining candles, and the shadowed walls are now viewed in relation to emerging light. The castle reveals its geometry slowly, outlining hallways, furniture, and thresholds previously known only through touch and sound. This reorientation is subtle, almost unnoticed, until full daylight arrives. As inhabitants wake fully, routines reassert themselves. Food is prepared, fires are kindled, doors and shutters are opened to welcome warmth and fresh air. The transition from night to day is not sudden. It is orchestrated through gradual action, observation, and coordination. Every movement is informed by hours of experience and the lessons imparted by darkness. Children, who may have been half asleep through the earliest hours, respond with heightened energy. They stretch, yawn, and rise. Guided by adult example, their bodies and minds recalibrate to the rhythm of daylight, transitioning from the restricted, introspective hours of night to the broader, active possibilities of morning. Even the most routine tasks carry layers of significance at this hour. Drawing water, tending animals, preparing firewood, and organizing bedding are mundane. Yet they are markers of survival and continuity. Each act reinforces the rhythms imposed by the night and enables the household to resume its daily cycle efficiently and safely. You notice the lingering influence of the night's structure on waking behavior. Movements remain deliberate. Speech is measured. Eyes adjust gradually to brightness, reflecting the prolonged period of darkness. Even the mind adjusts slowly, processing sensations, recollecting memories, and preparing for decisions that daylight makes visible. Superstition, rituals, and attention cultivated during the night do not vanish instantly. Their effects persist into morning, shaping behavior, perception, and anticipation. Practices such as prayer, vigilance, and cautious movement carry lessons into daylight. They reinforce awareness and establish continuity between the extremes of night and day. You reflect on the cyclical nature of this existence. Night imposed limits. It demanded vigilance, patience, and adaptation. Morning restores agency, warmth, and clarity. Both are essential to the rhythm of life in a medieval castle. One cannot be understood fully without the other. And as the sun continues to rise, spilling warmth and light through stone corridors and across shared sleeping spaces, you understand that medieval nights were never isolated experiences. They were interdependent with day, shaping behavior, perception, and routine in ways that only become apparent when light finally returns. By the time the first true rays of sunlight reach the castle, the night has already taught its final lessons. Darkness recedes slowly, leaving the inhabitants aware of what they have endured and what remains possible. You feel the change not as a sudden event but as a gradual easing of tension. The chill in the stone begins to lift. Shadows shrink. Colors become perceptible again. Even the faintest beams of light carry reassurance and the promise of movement. Bodies that have lain still through hours of cold, vigilance, and careful observation begin to stretch and shift. Limbs unfurl, joints loosen, and the subtle weight of layered clothing is less pressing. The warmth you have shared with companions remains, but it is now supplemented by the sun's early influence, creeping through shutters and narrow windows to illuminate familiar shapes. You notice how much of your perception was shaped by absence. Walls previously indistinct now reveal textures, tapestries, and beams with clarity. Children awaken with a mixture of curiosity and energy. Their smaller bodies have adapted through the night, but now the opportunity to move freely and explore is enticing. Their laughter is muted initially, careful not to disturb others, yet it marks the change in rhythm. You sense how attentiveness cultivated in darkness translates into movement and caution, even in the first light. They step lightly, mindful of thresholds and obstacles, carrying lessons from the night into the day. Servants rise quietly but deliberately, moving to tend fires, relight lamps, and prepare food. The transition from sleep to action is measured, reflecting experience and the memory of darkness. They navigate corridors with confidence, aware of the stones that shifted underfoot, the steps that creak, and the drafty sections of the castle. Their motions are deliberate, and yet increasingly free, as morning dissolves the constraints of night. In noble chambers, the transition is more gradual. Those accustomed to warmth and light adjust slowly, rising from layers of bedding as the sun penetrates the room. Fire embers are rekindled, and morning tasks proceed with calm efficiency. The contrast between upper and lower floors remains, reflecting hierarchy, yet shared rhythms persist. Both spaces are tied together by the common experience of enduring darkness, vigilance, and cold. You hear subtle sounds now that were muted or interpreted differently in the dark. Birds outside announce their presence. The wind shifts, brushing against shutters differently. Water dripping from roofs becomes perceptible in context rather than ambiguous threat. Even distant animals contribute to the awakening, their movements now clear, reassuring, and expected. The natural world resumes its role in the rhythm of life, no longer obscured by fear or uncertainty. The kitchen awakens first. Fires are fed with fresh wood. Broths heat. Loaves begin to warm. Smells previously dormant now fill the castle. Cold and hunger recede with preparation. The scent of baked bread and simmering meals is a signal of continuity. Night's deprivation and caution are replaced by the opportunity to act, produce, and nourish. Shared sleeping spaces gradually empty. People move with awareness honed by the night, balancing speed and care. Clothing remains layered, adjusted for temperature, but activity resumes. The lessons of night vigilance, patience, attentiveness continue to shape movement and perception. Even in the relative security of morning, awareness of danger and discomfort lingers subtly, guiding decision and behavior. You notice how memory of the night influences conversations and planning. Tales of subtle creaks, strange sounds, shifting embers, and whispered prayers inform discussions. Skills learned in darkness, managing fire, maintaining warmth, observing quietly, interpreting sound remain valuable. They shape how the household engages with day, integrating night's lessons into waking activity. Children, now fully awake, exhibit confidence earned through experience. Small tasks undertaken in darkness, from monitoring animals to navigating shared spaces, carry into daylight. Responsibility and coordination are internalized early, forming habits that will influence their behavior for life. Night has been a teacher, and the lessons persist beyond the absence of shadow. Animals respond to the sun too. Livestock stir with renewed purpose. Horses, goats, and chickens move with patterns informed by long nights of rest and vigilance. Their presence continues to shape human activity, reinforcing schedules, providing warmth, and maintaining familiarity. Life, both human and animal, resumes its interdependent rhythm. You realize the night's influence has not vanished with light. Vigilance, awareness, and patience remain as residues, structuring how the household navigates even ordinary tasks. The sequence of darkness has left an imprint on body, mind, and social coordination, demonstrating the interwoven nature of night and day in medieval life. The castle itself, now illuminated, displays the marks of the night: smoke stains, worn stone, bedding disturbed, and residual warmth in the air all tell the story of hours survived. Memory of activity, movement, and attention is embedded in the environment, teaching those who notice to respect its patterns. And as the sun rises fully, you understand the rhythm of medieval existence. Night imposes limits, darkness shapes behavior, and dawn restores opportunity. The experience of cold, limited light, vigilance, superstition, shared warmth, and attentive care becomes part of daily life. Each sunrise is not just the end of darkness, but a reward for endurance, patience, and communal survival. The night has passed, and those who navigated it emerge prepared, connected, and attuned to the fragile balance between fear and comfort. The morning light is gentle now, spilling softly across stone floors and through open shutters. Shadows shrink and warmth returns, filling corners that seemed permanent only hours before. You stretch slightly, feeling the tension in your muscles relax. The chill of the night recedes gradually, replaced by the quiet reassurance of sunlight and the shared presence of others around you. The sounds of animals, previously muffled and mysterious, now carry clarity. Birds call, livestock shifts comfortably. Even distant wind brushing the walls seems less threatening, more part of a living rhythm than a challenge to endurance. You notice how the lessons of night persist subtly in your body and mind. Awareness remains sharpened, attention measured, movements are deliberate, even in light. The routines shaped by darkness, the careful handling of fire, the shared warmth, the attentiveness to sound linger as a gentle imprint, guiding actions without effort. Children stretch and murmur quietly, learning naturally from the patterns established through hours of observation, while adults move with practiced ease, coordinating warmth, food, and activity seamlessly. There is a quiet satisfaction in this rhythm, a calm acknowledgement that night has been survived. Vigilance, patience, and shared care ensured safety and comfort, while darkness taught lessons impossible to replicate in light alone. Even as warmth and clarity return, the awareness cultivated through hours of night remains. It is a subtle gift of endurance, a reminder of resilience built into ordinary routines, and a testament to human adaptability. As the sun climbs higher, you take a deep breath, feeling body, mind, and environment harmonize. The night has passed, leaving a world renewed, layered with memory and experience. Stone, warmth, fire, sound, and shadow all exist in quiet balance. And in this moment of stillness, you feel the enduring connection between night and day, darkness and light, vigilance and rest, woven seamlessly into the fabric of life within the castle. The lessons of medieval nights linger, calming, grounding, and reassuring. As the day continues onward, sweet dreams,